Chapter 493. On this day Ouyang Shang received a letter which made him quite curious. In the savage land letters were very rare. Because of the special geographical conditions here, it was difficult for many communication spells to work normally. As for the flying sword, it seemed safe, but it could easily be intercepted by the monsters that lived here in midair. In the past few months in the savage land, they rarely received letters from their sect elders. This group of management trainees were almost isolated from the outside world. However, they still had a way to contact each other. As long as they could closely connect with the feng shui line spiritual energy in the savage land, they could use the power of the earth to transmit messages. However, to use the feng shui line spiritual energy, they needed to build a corresponding altar, which was not something that could be done in a day and a half. The resources needed to be invested were also considerable, especially in the savage land. When this group of people set off from Spirit Sword Mountain, each of them carried construction materials, but the number was not much. After all, the economic situation of the sect was a bit difficult. If they didn't find a place with good feng shui, generally no one would be willing to invest resources to build an altar. Even Ouyang Shang's team, in order to better open up the Blessed Fountain's flood dragon, had gathered enough resources to build a fortress at the top of the mountain, which had an altar for communication. Ouyang Shang thought that the progress of opening up the wasteland was fast. This Blessed Fountain of Great Song Mountain, in the entire eastern region of the savage land, was neither too big nor too small. It could be regarded as a place with good feng shui. The quality of the buried nodes at the bottom of the Blessed Fountain was quite good, which was suitable for the cultivation of cultivators of the King Pill stage. And they saw that they could completely occupy this place in 4 or 5 months, so they invested resources to build it here. And the base had just been built. And the other teams of junior brothers and sisters should not progress so fast. Or did they encounter difficulties in opening up the wasteland and had to build the base in an unsuitable place? With many questions in his heart, Ouyang Shang opened the letter. His eyes only swept through it twice and then his complexion changed slightly. The letter was a letter asking for help. The content of the letter was very simple. Junior brother Lu Sandao lost contact in the desert area and earnestly asks big brother for help. The person who wrote the letter was Feng Yin, a junior brother who was quite trusted by him. His aptitude and perception were excellent. Although limited by various reasons, his strength was not the top in the golden generation, but his mature temperament could shoulder heavy responsibilities. When they set off this time, they were divided into several teams. The team leader who headed to the northernmost point was Feng Yin. Based on his understanding of Feng Yin, he was a rather strong-minded person. Even if he encountered difficulties, he would try his best to solve them himself, unwilling to trouble others. Now that he had written a letter asking for help, the situation was probably not as simple as losing contact. He also knew junior brother Lu Sandao very well. He was one of the few outer sect disciples in the golden generation. There was actually a story behind this title of outer sect disciple. His master was one of the elders of the Heavenly Sword Hall, and he could be considered to have a good background. However, he did not have a good background. Before he entered the mountain, he was a famous bandit in the mortal world, killing people like scything flax. By chance, he was enlightened under the hands of an elder of the Heavenly Sword Hall and set foot on the road of immortality. However, after stepping into the celestial sect, Lu Sandao still had the aura of a bandit. It was inevitable that he would have some difficulties in getting along with his fellow disciples. After that, he became more and more eccentric. He was even jokingly called an outer disciple of the Lingjian school. Disciples who grew up in such an environment were proud and aloof, acting alone. Long before the management trainee program, he had gone into dangerous places alone many times to train. Everyone had long been accustomed to it. At first, when he and junior brother Feng Yin were put in the same team, some people were worried that Feng Yin would not be able to control him. Now it seemed like there was a problem. Losing contact in the desert area. TSK, a good swimmer would get drowned. Ouyang Shang closed the letter and in his heart he already had a general idea. It must be that Lu Sandao, relying on his earth element heavenly spirit root, coupled with his many years of painstaking cultivation of earth element spell, thought that he could move freely in the desert area, more skillful than many indigenous creatures. Then he left the team alone and went deep into the desert alone to build a base. However, he did not expect that there was a great danger hidden in the desert, which was not something that could be solved by a mere earth element heavenly spirit root. Then the whole team was affected because of him. Of course, the disciples of Spirit Sword sect were of the same breath and branch. No matter how popular Lu Sandao was, when he was in danger they could not just stand idly by. However, from Feng Yin's letter asking for help, This idiot, even if it's urgent, he should at least write what he wants me to do. It's just a plea for help. Who knows what I should help you with? Do you want me to help you burn incense for Lu Sandow? However, from another point of view, although Feng Yin was often negligent, he would not be so crude. Most likely, when he wrote the letter, the surrounding situation was already very unfavorable, so he didn't have time to write too long. That last plea for help might not be to help him find someone, but to help all of them get out of trouble. As for the location of the letter, it was not difficult to trace it back along the remaining magical power in the letter. The problem was, right now he was somewhat unable to get away from Blessed Fountain. In the leveling plan, he was the most important part. During the period of Wang Lu's closed-door training, he was the only one who could pin down the Flood Dragon. Without him, no matter how hard the others fought, the huge gap between them and the Flood Dragon could not be made up. As for giving up the Flood Dragon of Blessed Fountain, it was not impossible. After all, human life was more important. However, even giving up Blessed Fountain was not a simple matter. If he left like this base would definitely not be able to be kept. The Flood Dragon had even spat out the dragon bead in the last battle. Obviously, it wanted to fight to the death with humans at all costs. He would never defend his old home at Blessed Fountain. Once Ouyang Shang left, the Flood Dragon would immediately rush out of the water and rush here. At that time, his junior brothers and sisters who had not yet fully grown up would absolutely not be able to defend. If they couldn't defend, then they could only run, but where could they run to? The savage land was full of danger at every step. They couldn't just run around randomly. Moreover, from the beginning, going deep into Blessed Fountain was a dangerous move. The strength of the surrounding monsters was generally relatively high. Without his leadership, could the others safely retreat to the safe area? However, if he waited for everyone to return to the safe area, Feng Yin's team would probably be wiped out. Alas, it was really hard to split into two. But fortunately, there was a useful person on hand. No, to be precise, it should be better than him. It was just that he didn't know how much his injury had recovered. 3 months ago, he was bombarded by the dragon bead and was almost on the verge of death. How much could he recover in just 3 months was really a problem. Thinking of this, Ouyang Shang felt even more headache. Fortunately, just half a day later, another letter ushered in a favorable turn of events. Junior brother Lu has encountered a benefactor. We have turned the situation around. I am very ashamed for disturbing senior brother before. The second letter from Feng Yin was much more substantial in content. As the letter said, their situation had turned for the better, so they had enough time to write a long letter. According to Feng Yin, Lu Sandow went deep into the desert alone a month ago, and then there was no news of him. According to the original agreement, he should return from the desert within a week at most. If he didn't return within the time limit, then he had encountered trouble. Feng Yin tried a variety of means but failed to get in touch with him. In desperation, he had to lead the team deep into the desert to search and rescue together. Of course, as the leader, Feng Yin was responsible for all the team members, so he didn't dare to go too deep. Once they really encountered danger, he could only abandon Lu Sandow and save the others. Unfortunately, just as they entered the desert area, they encountered a violent sandstorm. The blazing astral wind was like a sharp blade that tore open people's skin and flesh. The group was in a dilemma, so they used magic to dig up the sand dunes and built temporary shelters underground to survive. What followed was an endless sandstorm. The sandstorm in the desert area lasted for a full week and showed no signs of slowing down. Somehow, the underground of the desert was unbearably hot, and the spiritual energy was almost exhausted. The group persisted for a week, and their supplies were rapidly consumed. It was difficult to continue. In this desperate situation, Feng Yin had to try to ask others for help. Given that the environment in the desert area was so harsh, ordinary people would not be able to protect themselves, let alone help. Therefore, after thinking about it, he could only ask for help from the eldest senior brother. Under the raging sandstorm, the spiritual energy in the ley line was very chaotic. Feng Yin tried to send a long letter several times but all failed. In the end, he could only send a short message for help. As a result, shortly after Feng Yin sent the first letter, the sandstorm stopped. At the same time, Lu Sandow, who had been missing for more than a week, also returned and brought a group of strange friends. It's hard to imagine that there is a civilization of intelligent creatures in the savage land. They are a group of natives living in the depths of the desert. Their appearance is highly similar to that of humans, but because they live in a hot environment, their skin is red and purple from the sun. At the same time, because of the lack of plants in the desert area, they basically hunt for meat for a living, so they have sharp teeth. Although they look fierce, they are actually docile and amiable. Previously, when junior brother Lu was attacked and seriously injured by a strange beast in the desert, it was them who saved him. It was also them who found us after the sandstorm stopped and brought us precious food and water. At present, we are in good condition, and there is no need for senior brother to worry about us. Seeing this letter, Ouyang Shang was really surprised. There was actually an intelligent civilization in the savage land, which was an unheard of wonder. The sect elders had explored the savage land for hundreds and thousands of years, but they had never mentioned the existence of such a group of sandmen in the desert. But then again, in the past hundreds and thousands of years, the strength of the Lingjian school alone had never been able to thoroughly explore the savage land, especially in the depths of the desert, which seemed to be a place where no one had ever been. The existence of the sandmen made sense. But no matter how he looked at it, the encounter of Feng Yin and the others seemed to be too coincidental. It was so coincidental that it was hard to believe it was a pure coincidence. But at the same time, looking at it from another perspective, wasn't his own experience the same as well? Wang Lu, a transmigrator from 150 years in the future. Hey, even such a person could be encountered, so what if Feng Yin and the others encountered the sandmen in the desert? Thinking of this, Ouyang Shang decided not to care too much for the time being. The management trainee program of the sect was to cultivate talents who could take charge of their own affairs, not trash who would shout that their big senior brother and master had been captured by demons when they encountered difficulties. The problems that they encountered should be solved by themselves. Even if there was any danger in the Sandmen tribe, it was also the cultivation of Feng Yin and the others. Therefore, Ouyang Shang began to reply to Feng Yin and the others, and then prepared to send the letter. At this time, the sound of footsteps sounded behind him, and the letter from Feng Yin that was placed on the side was picked up by a person. Junior brother Wang Lu, are you all right? In this frontline base, only Ouyang Shang and Wang Lu could freely enter and exit his room, so he didn't need to look back to know that Wang Lu, who had been in seclusion for 3 months, had recovered from his injuries. Well, after resting for 3 months, my sexual ability has completely recovered. Do you want to say performance recovery? It's all the same. Tiske, senior brother Ouyang, this letter is a bit interesting. Wang Lu said and flicked the letter. Red skin fangs. Why does the description in this letter look so familiar? As he spoke, the smile on his face gradually turned cold. Chapter 494. Red-faced and fanged, the royal family of the demon world. 9 regions was so big that there were actually many red-faced and fanged humanoid creatures. Feng Yin didn't write in detail in the letter, so there were at least 7 or 8 possibilities of meeting this vague condition. The so-called red-faced and fanged humanoid creatures were likely to be just a coincidence. However, Wang Lu never believed in any coincidence especially. He knew that after 100 years, the savage land would be occupied by the Black Tide, and the destruction of the Golden Generation would be inextricably linked to the demon race. Seeing that Wang Lu had a clear reaction to the content of the letter, Ouyang Shang was suddenly startled. Junior brother, what did you associate with? Senior brother should remember the Second Great War of Immortals and Demons 2,000 years ago, right? You mean the royal family of the demon race? As the big brother of Spirit Sword sect, Ouyang Shang was also erudite and multi-talented, so he quickly reacted to what Wang Lu was talking about. I think this explanation is a bit far-fetched. The race that has disappeared for 2,000 years suddenly appeared here? Moreover, it's the royal family of the demon race, and they even warmly entertain junior brother Feng Yin and the others? No matter how you look at it, these are not related to the known conditions. Wang Lu said, that's because your known conditions are not enough. In my timeline you guys died in the hands of the demon race. But, if it's the demon race, what reason do they have to help junior brother Feng Yin and the others survive in the sandstorm? Wang Lu said, in short, it's out of good intention to cure the disease and save people. Ouyang Shang said, if it's not out of good intention, then it can only be explained that they have another purpose in helping junior brother Feng Yin. Wang Lu nodded. Moreover, from the situation of the letter. As soon as they sent out the letter asking for help, the demon race immediately went to rescue them. This timing is also a bit delicate. Ouyang Shang said, if it's not a coincidence, then it's intentional. I think we might as well assume that through the change in the spiritual energy along the feng shui line, they found out that junior brother Feng Yin has sent out a letter asking for help. They speculated that if they leave it alone, it's likely that there would be outsiders coming to rescue them. Therefore, they rescued them first to avoid unnecessary trouble. What's the point of doing this? Is it because they are not strong enough and are afraid of external forces, or is it because Feng Yin and the others are of special value to them? Ouyang Shang curiously asked, what do you mean by special value? Wang Lu said, "This is how I understand it. If it weren't for the fact that Feng Yin and the others have more value, they would have directly killed them. As local natives, they should have the ability to do so. Moreover, there are dangerous monsters everywhere in the savage land, so it's normal for people to die. After a sandstorm, it's guaranteed that there won't be any bones left. Even if we want to find them, we won't be able to find any clues." Then the so-called value of use. Ouyang Shang said, showing even more doubt, "Junior brother, as far as you know, does the demon race use the tradition of human blood sacrifice in exchange for power?" Wang Lu said, "This tradition is not only practiced by the devil race, but also by human cultivators. It's not like you haven't heard the story of those evil cultivators sacrificing tens of thousands of people to refine the million spirits blood pearl. The demon civilization isn't inferior to the human civilization, so it's normal for them to have similar techniques." Ouyang Shang said, "But this still doesn't make sense. Feng Yin and the others have been trapped in the sandstorm for a few days, and they're like dried-up oil lamps. If the demon race wants to make a move, they have no capital to resist at all. What's more, although the letter didn't say it clearly, it can be seen that the demon race's operation in the desert is quite good. Their overall strength is not bad, and it's not something that 7 or 8 people can contend with. Finally, they really don't need to bring supplies to Feng Yin and the others to help them restore their strength." Wang Lu touched his chin. "Sorting out the following known conditions, we can roughly infer that the demon race needs them to be alive and maintain a certain strength, but they can't have a sense of resistance, and they can't be disturbed by outsiders. Combining these 3 points, do they want to borrow seeds? For example, they have fully absorbed the lessons of the previous 2 great wars of immortals and demons and intend to create a brand new race that combines the strengths of the 2 races. Therefore, they need the genius elites of human cultivators such as Feng Yin to provide seeds, which is similar to the demon race's reparation plan." "No reparation plan." Upon hearing this, Ouyang Shang was silent, because he had nothing to say. "According to my understanding of the demon race, they should be on the verge of extinction. If you are interested in the specific situation, I will explain it to you later. Although it's not clear how they came to 9 regions, but for a race that is on the verge of extinction, reproduction is the first priority. And if their population is small, then frequent inbreeding and reproduction is likely to lead to racial deterioration. At least as far as I know, the royal family of the demon race can condense a set of heavy armor with their own strength as long as they reach adulthood. However, the race mentioned in Feng Yin's letter seems to be running naked, and if they continue to degenerate, it's estimated that even their primary sexual characteristic would not exist. Right now, it's likely that in order to optimize their racial genes, they mated with the human race with the best genes in 9 regions. You actually have a reason to enrich and perfect a debauched and unreasonable conjecture?" Wang Lu smiled slightly. "Senior brother, you flatter me. You're welcome." Ouyang Shang really couldn't let out his anger, so he could only cup his hands in obeisance, feeling ashamed of his inferiority and the loss of moral integrity. Wang Lu smiled and then sternly said, "If it's not the demon race's revenge plan, what else can it be? It can't be that they are playing a long line to catch a big fish, playing hard to get. When we relax our vigilance, they will create a crisis and use Feng Yin and the others as hostages to catch us, the supporters, right? Why not?" Wang Lu froze for a moment and then said, "Senior brother, do you think this conjecture is reliable? I think it's boring, not surprising at all. It's not as fun as the demon race's revenge plan. Please don't play with it. I think the fishing tactic is probably the truth. If they are really the remnants of the demon race as you said, they should be targeting me now. About that, big brother, what virtue do you have to be targeted by them like this? Because I am the strongest among the young cultivators in 9 regions. If they can get rid of me, 9 regions will have 1 less leader in the future. From the standpoint of the demon race, this is a big deal that is enough to mobilize a large number of people." "Senior brother, did you just say that you are ashamed of your inferiority and the loss of moral integrity? Aren't you being too modest?" "I'm just stating the facts. In this generation of 9 regions, there are few cultivators that I like." "Very well, then let's give up Feng Yin and the others in order to protect the future pillars of 9 regions, right?" Ouyang Shang laughed and said, "If even his junior brother can be thrown away no matter how high his cultivation base is in the future, he can't be called a pillar." Upon hearing this, the figure of a girl holding the Kill Immortal sword immediately appeared in Wang Lu's mind, and he immediately said, "I like to hear this." Ouyang Shang said, "Of course Feng Yin and the others must be saved, but things need to be considered in the long run. What's more, we don't have a good reason to save them now. Rushing there will only put them in danger. Wang Lu said, moreover, in a short time, their lives should not be in danger. After all, a live bait is still useful. However, things should not be dragged on for too long. In case the other side really implements the plan to make up for the demon race, we can't just ignore the chastity crisis of Feng Yin and the others. Now that I have recovered from my injury, our next step is to speed up the speed and get rid of that flood dragon as soon as possible. After settling these people, we can go to the desert to save them. Yes, now that the value of this flood dragon has been squeezed out by more than half, it's not impossible to end it a little earlier. However, during this time, it's best to keep writing to the other side to stabilize the situation, and also to inquire more about the details of the other side. While speaking, Ouyang Shang had already picked up the writing brush and began to write vigorously. Wang Lu, who was watching from the side, saw Ouyang Shang writing like this: Junior brother Feng Yin, you are lucky to have survived this disaster. The desert sand people have come to the rescue at a critical moment. You must remember to repay the life-saving grace. You have been tortured in the sandstorm for several days, and your corporeal body and Jade Mansion have been squeezed. Presumably you are already scarred, but remember that crisis and opportunity coexist. This time, it is also an opportunity for you to advance by leaps and bounds in your cultivation. Ouyang Shang nagged, writing from cultivation method to daily life, from dealing with interpersonal relationships to everything big and small. The letter was thousands of words long, which made Wang Lu intoxicated, thinking, such skillful writing skill, if senior brother goes to serialize a novel, he must be a good hand. But in addition to that, Wang Lu also saw something from it. Encrypted text? Yes, the decryption method is only known by several team leaders. I have written the matter of the demon race in it. I believe that after Feng Yin learns about it, he will make a reasonable judgment. Moreover, the text does not conceal its concern. It also asks Feng Yin to write a letter every day on the pretext of paying attention to the recovery of the injury, which can also be regarded as a safety lock for them. The most important thing is, Ouyang Shang smiled and reached out his hand to flick the last few lines of the letter. 1 month later, when I have finished the affairs at hand, I will personally visit and express my sincere gratitude to the Sand People on behalf of the sect. In other words, 1 month later, Ouyang Shang planned to have a showdown with the demon race in the desert. He believed that the demon race could also see this letter. If they really wanted to lure him, they should not care about waiting for a month. However, with a month of preparation time, Ouyang Shang had enough confidence to break into any dragon's pool or tiger's den. However, this determination was greatly shaken on the 3rd day. Thank you for your concern, senior brother. I am both touched and ashamed. Everything in the desert is good. The Sand People treat us sincerely and warmly. Not only do they arrange accommodation and food for us, they also provide us with precious spiritual herbs that can restore magic power and heal injuries. It's just that I am touched and also a little troubled. These native girls are passionate and unrestrained. It is really a little difficult to resist. When he received this letter, Ouyang Shang held the letter with both hands and was stunned for a full 30 minutes. The more he read, the more his hands trembled. In the end, even with Ouyang Shang's temperament and cultivation, he could not suppress the anger in his heart. *CK The Demon Race. Chapter 495. People often said that 9 out of 10 things would not go as one wished in the world, which meant that things in the world often did not develop as people expected. For example, this was the case in the northern desert of the Savage Land. When they first received Feng Yin's letter for help, Ouyang Shang and Wang Lu conceived countless possibilities, speculated on the various plots and tricks of the demon race, speculated on the various kinds of torture that Feng Yin and the others might encounter in the northern desert area, and also designed countless rescue plans. However, no one thought that the development of things would be so dramatic. While they were still on tenterhooks here, on the other side, they were deeply immersed in the trouble of a gentle dream. At that time, Wang Lu was responsible for replying to the letter. For Feng Yin's question of how difficult it was to resist the enthusiasm of the indigenous girl, Wang Lu's reply was to write a sunflower treasure book for him, advising him to cut off the root of his troubles as soon as possible. Although this might be a bit unfair to the lady boss in the history line, Wang Lu was so indignant that he was too lazy to care too much about it. Of course, such a reply could not solve the problem. Moreover, just 2 days later, Feng Yin sent another letter saying, in the desert area, the great sandstorm that happened once every 100 years raged again. For several months, except for the oasis where the Sand People lived, the rest of the area would become a dead zone that no creatures could enter. The oasis was completely isolated from the outside world. In other words, they were trapped to death. After that, Ouyang Shang and Feng Yin exchanged several letters, confirming that at this time, the desert was indeed a dead zone that could not be entered or exited at all. Thus, the rescue plan could only be considered at length. Fortunately, the oasis where Feng Yin and the others were located was indeed a blessed place. It was abundant in spiritual energy, which would not delay their cultivation. The only problem was that the increasingly enthusiastic indigenous girls had gradually shown a tendency to use unscrupulous means, so the chastity crisis could not be delayed. No one could have predicted such a development, especially the performance of the desert people, which was completely beyond the expectation of Wang Lu and Ouyang Shang. In short, it was not clear whether the demons in the desert area were too cunning that they played the play perfectly, so that the two generations of Spirit Sword sect disciples could not find the flaw, or the initial speculation of Wang Lu and Ouyang Shang was wrong with the facts. In short, for the whole month after that, the Sand people did not show any flaw. It could even be said that their performance was impeccable. The Sandmen saved Feng Yin and the others at the critical moment and provided them with meticulous care. Apart from basic necessities, there were also passionate native girls with hot figures accompanying him every day. This kind of treatment even made Ouyang Shang doubt the veracity of his conjecture. Were those Sandmen casting a long line to catch a big fish? Or were they really planning to make up for it with the demons? Of course, being in the savage land and experiencing bizarre things, it was never a bad thing to be more careful. Therefore, Ouyang Shang repeatedly used ciphers to emphasize safety, emphasizing that Feng Yin and other junior brothers and sisters should guard their chastity. During this period he was very patient. Later on, Feng Yin even tactfully said, "Big brother, you don't have to worry about us so much. We know what to do." Ouyang Shang then said in a self-deprecating manner, "Tisk, I was actually despised by others." Wang Lu inwardly said, "You're talking nonsense. Although everyone knows that you talk a lot for such a small matter, to update 3 letters a day for a month, do you expect people to give you full attendance? They will only think that you have ulterior motives." Ouyang Shang somewhat incredulously said, "Ulterior motives? So, now I'm like an ugly person who can't eat grapes but won't allow others to eat? This is too much, I'm completely sincere." Wang Lu snorted. "So you can just *ck a few mountain spirits and water monsters to prove yourself? I'm serious. I think the mermaid maids in the Dragon Palace of Blessed Fountain are pretty good. They are fresh and delicate, and they have been trained by the Flood Dragon to be obedient and sensible. Their skills are also skillful. They are much better than those aboriginals in the desert. I see Feng Yin and the others crying every day about being pestered by the aboriginal girls. To put it bluntly, it's because of their virgin mentality. They have never seen a woman, so everything is new to them. As long as you show off the taste of the mermaids in the Dragon Palace to Feng Yin and the others, they will definitely feel that the taste of the aboriginal girls is like chewing wax. From then on, they will wholeheartedly wait for you and me to rescue them, and then come to Blessed Fountain to enjoy the pleasure of the mermaids. That also makes sense." Ouyang Shang raised his eyebrows and seemed to seriously consider the feasibility of this. When Wang Lu saw this, he was simply overjoyed. To put it bluntly, this senior brother Ouyang was actually no different from Feng Yin and the others. The education of the golden generation in Lingzhen School was good in other aspects, except for the lack of sex education. Well, let me, this later generation disciple, give you some remedial lessons. Fortunately, in the end, things did not develop in that direction. Because just when Ouyang Shang began to seriously consider capturing the mermaids in the Dragon Palace, Feng Yin's next letter for help arrived. This time the content was much simpler. It seemed to be full of trivial matters, but it was written in an encrypted way. "We found that the Sand people are deliberately manipulating the sandstorm to wreak havoc. This sandstorm is not a cycle of 100 years, but a secret weapon in their hands." The content of the letter ended here, but after receiving the letter, the faces of Ouyang Shang and Wang Lu changed. It was nothing new that the Sand people could use the sandstorm as a weapon. The problem was that the previous long sandstorm was actually intentional. In order to trap Feng Yin and the others, they were willing to go to such lengths? Was it really just to complete the plan for the demons? Or, half a day later, the arrival of the next letter made the situation even worse. "Senior brother, those Sand people seem to have worn out their patience and have begun to take action directly. 2 junior brothers were forcibly taken away by a prestigious woman in the Sand people tribe. What should we do next? Please tell us as soon as possible, senior brother." At that time it was Wang Lu who received the letter. Because he had received similar letters too many times before, he casually replied to the letter, "Remember to let them take their medicine afterwards." That was it. When he came back to his senses, he realized that those desert demons seemed to be starting to play for real. His joking guess had become true. The demons really wanted to borrow their seeds, and probably not only to borrow their seeds but also their lives. Because of such a strong attitude, it was clear that the Sand People, no, the demons no longer cared whether it would arouse the hostility of Feng Yin and the others. In fact, with their ability to control the sandstorm, they didn't need to care at all. Things could no longer be delayed, so Wang Lu immediately looked for Ouyang Shang to discuss the next step. As for the rescue in the north, they could set off at any time, but the other junior brothers and sisters were not willing to let them stay here. The strategy of Blessed Fountain has reached the last step, and it is also the most risky step. If we leave at this time, the situation on Feng Yin's side was urgent, but the situation here was also not so optimistic. The opponent was a powerful Yuanying level enemy. In case something happened, to put it coldly, there were only 7 or 8 people on Feng Yin's side, but there were more than 30 lives here. And at this time Yang Fei knocked on the door and entered the room. Yo, senior brother Wang, are you two discussing the battle plan again? Actually, there's no need to be so troublesome. The flood dragon is already an arrow at the end of its flight, so there's no risk at all. Even if you don't come forward, we have an 80 to 90% chance to kill him. Since a month ago, Ouyang Shang led the team to safely retreat in the face of the Flood Dragon's Dragon Ball without the help of Wang Lu. The contrast in strength between the two sides began to truly reverse. Since then, the cultivators of Spirit Sword sect were in high spirits and their strength increased day by day, while the Flood Dragon was getting worse and worse, becoming more and more difficult to match. Right now, relying on the Dragon Palace's geographical advantage to stubbornly resist, defeat was only a matter of time, but that was under the leadership of Wang Lu and Ouyang Shang. After all, the Flood Dragon was the overlord of this place for hundreds of years. How could it die so easily? However, before Ouyang Shang could say anything, he saw Kai Xia also came into the room. Two senior brothers, let's get straight to the point. We can see that you actually have something important to deal with, but because of us, these burdens, you can't get away. But, in my opinion, you should just let go and do what you should do. As junior brothers and sisters, we can't always rely on you. Wang Lu sneered. Yo, your wings have grown hard, your chest is not big but your tone is not small. Then Kai Xia unceremoniously kicked his knee. Big brother, we're serious. Kai Xia said and then took out a thick stack of paper from her mustard seed bag. This is the battle plan that we drafted ourselves. It's a plan on how to fight against the Flood Dragon without your help. Perhaps it's not as perfect as what the two senior brothers did together, but Ouyang Shang took the plan, glanced at it, and then his eyes could no longer move away. After Wang Lu came over, he also slightly raised his eyebrows. Before, he really underestimated this group of people. They had always been overshadowed by Ouyang Shang's brilliance, but in fact, they were the most proud golden generation in the past thousands of years of Lingjian school. Ouyang Shang's strength lay in his comprehensive ability, but it didn't mean that he was far superior to everyone else in any aspect. When Yang Fei and the others gathered their strength, it was possible for them to surpass the big brother. Very well. After a long silence, Ouyang Shang sighed. I agree with this plan. In fact, even if I did it myself, I can't do it better. As long as you strictly implement it, you can indeed defeat the Flood Dragon under the premise of controllable risks. After getting the approval of their senior brother, Yang Fei and Kai Xia could not help but cheer in unison, and even hugged each other tightly. However, the next moment, the cheering came to an abrupt end. But there are some things that I still want to emphasize. First of all, before he could finish his words, Ouyang Shang was kicked out by the two people at the same time. Half a day later, they set foot on the road to the north with Wang Lu. It was just that the number of people in the team was one more than originally expected. In addition to Ouyang Shang and Wang Lu, there was also Wang Wu who silently followed behind. Wang Wu accompanying them was Ouyang Shang's request. In fact, this also surprised Wang Lu. No matter from which point of view, Wang Wu, whose cultivation base was still not mature enough, was just a pig teammate. And going north to rescue them meant fighting with the demons, which was extremely risky. Relatively speaking, Wang Wu was just a burden. However, when Ouyang Shang seriously said, I don't feel at ease without her by my side, Wang Lu could not find any reason to object. Well, who told us not to have time to catch the mermaid of the Dragon Palace? Using this guy to make do with us is fine, right? Chapter 496. From the Great Song Mountain where Blessed Fountain was located to the desert area where Feng Yin and the others were trapped, it took them 2 days. And this was the result of Wang Lu and Ouyang Shang's best efforts. The desolate savage land was, after all, the desolate savage land. For the two top Jindan stage Taoists, it was not their own backyard. In order to avoid risks, the two of them actually took a big detour and chose a route where the distribution of monsters was relatively sparse and their strength was not too strong. They traveled day and night. As for Wang Wu, the two of them took turns to carry her. At this time, she was far from being as graceful as she would be in the future. She still looked like a little girl that was as light as a feather. It was not difficult to carry her and did not affect the journey. When the three of them arrived at the edge of the desert, they saw the rolling sand dunes, the sun was shining brightly and there were no clouds in the sky. The clear sky seemed to be making a silent invitation, inviting them to go deep into the desert and to the mysterious oasis. Stopping in front of the entrance, Wang Lu suddenly felt a trace of alarm in his heart. He slightly frowned. I always feel that there is no turning back, Ouyang Shang smiled. Then do you think the result will be better? Of course not. By the way, do you really want to take this guy with you? I still don't think he's reliable, he's really weak. Wang Lu pointed to Wang Wu who was sitting cross-legged not far away. Originally he was just casually complaining, but unexpectedly Ouyang Shang became somewhat serious. She is very important to you in your history. This was indeed not wrong. To be able to survive that catastrophe and become an incomparably important person to you, the future lead disciple, she should have something special. If you see her appearance 100 years later, you should know that she is not just something special. On the contrary, junior brother Yang Fei and the others should not have survived, right? Looking at your reaction, I can see that you are very unfamiliar with them. Wang Lu suddenly remembered someone in the team who was ignored by him. Marshal Uncle Lu Li, I am sorry. On the contrary, it seems that you are familiar with Feng Yin, so he should also be one of the survivors. So isn't this very simple logic? Let her try to coexist with the survivors. It's safer than living with the dead, right? This logic does make some sense, so I'll take my leave with little sister Wang Wu. You can go to the desert and find Feng Yin. Hey, do you have the heart to watch me die alone? Wang Lu really wanted to say that he couldn't bear to see it, so he didn't want to see it. However, he considered that the moral integrity of this spirit sword sect's eldest brother was actually not much better than his own. In case he knelt down and hugged his leg, that scene would not be good. Not to mention that there was still his silent master behind him. If he let her helplessly watch his eldest brother die without saving him later on, they would definitely become enemies. Thinking of this, Wang Lu could only suppress the uneasiness in his heart. Alright, let's live and die together. The journey deep into the desert was much simpler than expected. The sandstorm that Feng Yin mentioned many times never appeared. Walking on the thousands of miles of yellow sand, there was no other obstacle except for the burning feeling that made people melt. Moreover, perhaps because of the recent sandstorm, even the number of monsters in the desert was pitifully small. Their journey was unimpeded all the way. Ouyang Shang was indeed worthy of his natural earth element physique. After entering the desert, he was like a fish in water. Under the scorching sun, he easily found the traces left by Feng Yin and the others more than a month ago and followed the traces all the way. After the three of them walked in the desert for a day and a night, they finally approached the target location. After crossing a sand dune, they were greeted by an inconceivable refreshing humidity in the desert. It was the oasis in the distance. In the oasis was the city, and the long-awaited sandmen that Wang Lu had a panoramic view. That is, the city of the demon race. This desert oasis was very different from the magnificent city in the new demon world. It was even far from the demon race city during the Five Spirits Blood War. The desert demons only built tents, mud pits and other buildings around the oasis with limited resources. It looked very primitive and crude. If Wang Lu hadn't determined their identity earlier, he would never have thought that this was a city built by the royal family of the demon realm. Similarly, the demons walking in the city were also very different from the majestic royal family temperament in his impression. Except for the iconic red face and fangs, there were actually not many royal characteristics on their bodies. Even the iconic heavy armor had degenerated. After looking at the sand dune for a while, Ouyang Shang frowned. The situation in front of him was too different from what he expected. The next plan could not be connected at all. Is this really a demon city? It's completely unguarded and I can't feel any hostility. We are already close to the edge of the city. According to his previous speculation, if the demons in the city had already forced themselves on Feng Yin and the others, it meant that the two sides had already shed all pretense of cordiality. The rescue of Ouyang Shang and Wang Lu would be an earth-shattering battle, and there would be no room for mediation between the two sides. But looking at the current situation, While he was puzzled, suddenly a sword light flew out from the oasis, and a pleasantly surprised voice came from afar. "Big brother, you're here?" A moment later, a young cultivator in a sand-colored shirt descended from the sky on a flying sword, his face full of joy. While he was still in midair, his eyes were firmly locked on Ouyang Shang, wishing that he could immediately throw himself into his arms. But before he could land, a khaki-colored circular sword light shield lit up. Wang Lu erected his indestructible non-phase sword defense, which immediately knocked the young man who fell from the sky, causing him to have a nosebleed. Ouyang Shang just sighed softly, feeling both angry and amused, but it was inconvenient for him to say anything. As for the person who was knocked away, he was naturally furious. "Who are you? How dare you act violently in front of Big Brother?" Wang Lu also sighed, not knowing how to introduce himself. Before this, although the two sides had exchanged letters several times, in fact, Feng Yin still didn't know the existence of Wang Lu. Should he tell him that he was the successor disciple that he would accept into the sect 100 years later? With the old guy's IQ, he certainly wouldn't understand it. When the young man flew in the sky, Wang Lu recognized that this person was the young Feng Yin. At this time, although he had not yet cultivated the stellar sword method, he could already vaguely see the shadow of the future peak deity stage. And the reason why Wang Lu still displayed his non-phase sword defense was very simple, because he didn't trust Feng Yin at this time. 3 days ago, he sent a letter asking for help, as if he had been swallowed alive by a demon girl. But at this time, he ran out as if nothing had happened. Who could trust him? Who knew if he couldn't resist the temptation in the past 3 days and offered his chastity to the enemy? Fortunately, Feng Yin reacted quickly. After questioning him, he realized that he was really reckless just now and quickly explained, "Big brother, I have been trying to send you a letter for the past 2 days, but I couldn't get in touch with you. Things have changed, I misunderstood them before." Misunderstood? Ouyang Shang was not in a hurry to make a decision. "Why don't you tell me?" Feng Yin nodded. "It's like this, the 2 junior brothers who were kidnapped 3 days ago have been released." Wang Lu sneered and said, "What kind of reason is that? They were the ones who captured them, so after they are released they are not responsible? According to this, as long as they insert it and then pull it out, it's not considered rape?" There are other secrets it's hard to explain in a few words." "Then tell me slowly." While speaking, Wang Lu still didn't put away the sword of Mount Kuan in his hand, showing his vigilance. Feng Yin hesitantly glanced at Wang Lu, and then cast an inquiring look at Ouyang Shang. "Tell me slowly." "Yes." Seeing that he was not trusted, Feng Yin could only feel depressed. "In fact, even I misunderstood them before." "Senior brother, you guessed it right. They are indeed the descendants of the demon race, but they have no relationship with the demon race during the Great War of Immortals and Demons. They don't want to cause disputes, they just want to live peacefully." Wang Lu sneered and said, "If one day your big brother tells you that he wants to practice silent meditation, will you believe it?" "Haha, how is that possible? It's better to kill him." "Ahem." Ouyang Shang coughed. Wang Lu said, "That being the case, how can you believe that the demon race will change their nature? In fact, your current reaction is even more suspicious." "I know." Feng Yin nodded. "So, if you don't believe me, please give me the sword of truth, I am willing to prove my innocence." "Sword of truth?" Wang Lu snorted, "That is not an omnipotent swordsmanship, there are too many ways to deceive others. If you really want to prove your innocence, please use rigorous logic and unquestionable evidence to speak." How could Feng Yin find unquestionable evidence in such a short time? He paced back and forth a few steps, becoming more and more restless. But at this time, an old voice faintly sounded. "Please don't make things difficult for him. This matter was caused by my clan, let me personally explain on behalf of my clan." In front of Wang Lu, a handful of yellow sand suddenly flew and rolled, gradually condensing into a stooped old demon man. The old man had a red face and fangs, dressed in coarse linen clothes with a heart-protecting mirror on his chest, hands wrapped in heavy gloves and a pair of metal boots on his feet. On the outside, he still retained some royal characteristics, but had completely lost the never-ending exuberant fighting spirit of the demon race's royal family. "I am the elder of this tribe," the old demon man said. "As you can see, we are the remnants of the demon race in 9 regions. Since the war more than 2,000 years ago, we have not been able to return to our homeland, but by chance we stayed here. So far, we have been reproducing for 2,000 years. 2,000 years of reproduction has made great changes in our tribe. We no longer want to turn against the human race and kill each other. We just hope to live peacefully in this oasis. Moreover, as you can see, even if we want to, we are powerless. With that, the old demon man untied his slightly heavy gloves, revealing a pair of extremely slender wrists. We have lost the ability to fight. Chapter 497. The old Asmodean's slender wrists were trembling, looking like dry twigs. With such wrists, he might not even be able to satisfy his own needs, not to mention holding a weapon and fighting with humans. Also, judging from the feeble breath of life of this old man, he did not have any combat ability to speak of. The spell of sand molding was beautiful, but no matter how beautiful it would be meaningless if it could not be used in actual combat. But what could a feeble old man prove? Any tribe that was good at fighting would not lack old, weak, sick or disabled people who had lost their ability to fight. Could it prove that the entire desert Asmodeans were not having sex? There was no such logic in the world. Therefore, as far as Wang Lu was concerned, this old Asmodean self-proof logic was simply hilarious. But right at this moment, Feng Yin could not help but explain, "Brother, they really have no ability to fight." Before Ouyang Shang could say anything, Wang Lu had already scolded, "You talk too much. No ability to fight? You said in the letter that Zhang Sheng and Wang Chenai were taken away by force. Is that bullsh*t? How can they take away the elites of the golden generation without combat ability?" Feng Yin said at once, "It's a misunderstanding, a misunderstanding. That is a complete misunderstanding. How can I explain this? Brother Zhang and Brother Wang had special reasons. They were poisoned but they did not know. No, actually, we were all poisoned. It's just that." At this moment, Feng Yin did not seem to be good with words. In a hurry, his ability to express himself had degraded to the level of an ape. For a moment, he was so anxious that he was waving his hands and feet, but he still could not express himself clearly. Wang Lu looked on and sighed to himself. No wonder after 100 years he was often scolded by Wang Wu. This old guy really had a low IQ. How could he reach the peak of the semi-god realm in just over 200 years with this IQ? Even Lu Li, whom Ouyang Shang thought highly of, was only at the peak of the nascent soul realm. Let me explain it. After all, it all started because of us. The old Asmodean sighed again and then told them the ins and outs of the story. The story went on for a long time, but Wang Lu and Ouyang Shang just stood quietly on the sand dune and listened. They didn't even care that the sun was gradually rising and the sunlight was burning hot. It was a story full of twists and turns. The story was divided into two stages. The first one was about the abduction of a disciple of Spirit Sword sect. First of all, Zhang Sheng and Wang Chenai were indeed abducted by force, but the two women who abducted them at that time did not want to harm them. Instead, they saw that they were poisoned and were almost beyond cure, so in a moment of desperation, they directly snatched them away to save them. As for why the two elite cultivators were unable to resist, it was precisely because they didn't know that they had been poisoned. They thought that they still had immortal spells and cultivation, but in fact they couldn't even resist two ordinary demon women. At that time, Feng Yin and the others happened to be separated from them and were not at the scene. It was only when he used the shadow viewing spell to go back in time that he discovered their whereabouts. At that time he had only seen two demon race women forcibly snatch him away, and he had even tracked the two of them into a room. Naturally, he had turned pale with fright and hurriedly wrote a letter to Ouyang Shang for help. In the end, not long after the letter was sent, it was discovered that everything was a misunderstanding. Then he would explain the strange behavior of the two women. They are the tribe's poison-extracting physicians. Whenever a tribesman is unfortunately eroded by the sand poison, it's them who would absorb the poison through yin and yang intercourse. This is the only detoxification method that our tribe has known for thousands of years. Moreover, at that time the situation was urgent. If there was a slight delay, the poison might break out. Moreover, because of this poison-extracting technique, they couldn't speak, so they couldn't explain it. So that's how it is. It's actually a blessing in disguise for those two. In the course of the story, in order to explain in detail, Feng Yin even used the shadow viewing spell again to show the scene that he saw that day. The two demon race poison-extracting physicians who forcibly rescued them were sexy and hot beauties. Although there were still some flaws in the standard of cultivators, for the two people who had never tasted meat, it was not a big problem. The whole story was basically reasonable, and with Feng Yin's repeated corroboration, there were not too many doubtful points to scrutinize. The only question was, how did he get poisoned out of the blue? Moreover, what kind of poison was it that could make a group of elite cultivators of Spirit Sword sect unknowingly fall into it? At that time, under the vague reminder of Feng Yin, they had been extra careful and on strict guard. The sand poison. The old demon explained, "It's also a nightmare that has plagued our tribe for 2,000 years. The essence of this poison is an invisible devil's curse. When the curse is calm, it is colorless and tasteless and it kills people invisibly. But when the curse breaks out, it will form a sandstorm that sweeps the desert, wiping out all life." Upon hearing the explanation of the old demon, Wang Lu was immediately surprised. What kind of new development is this? Can it make the royal family of the demon world have a nightmare for 2,000 years? What kind of sacred being is this? How could there be such a powerful existence in the northern desert of the savage land? Then the old demon began to tell the first story, which was also the content of the first letter from Feng Yin. The desert demons can control the sandstorm. In fact, we can influence the sandstorm to a certain extent, but to say that we can freely control it? The old demon shook his head with a wry smile. What we can do is to sacrifice our flesh and blood in exchange for a moment of satisfaction for the invisible devil, and thus linger on at death's door. After a pause, the old demon continued, "That invisible devil has endless divine power. Just by raising its hand, it can reverse the sun and the moon and reverse the flow of the river. 2,000 years ago, this desert used to be a lush forest. But it was corroded by its sand poison, and in just a few decades, it turned into yellow sand." Upon hearing this, Wang Lu was even more surprised. This desert was roughly thousands of miles in radius, yet it was actually corroded by an invisible devil? This was probably not a mortal means. 2,000 years ago, our tribe fought bravely against it, but you can see the situation now. We lost and completely became the plaything in the palm of the invisible devil. We thrive in this only oasis, and then contribute our flesh and blood essence to it in exchange for its curse to subside, so as to linger on at death's door. In other words, we are just like livestock. And 2,000 years of livestock life has made us completely lose the ability to resist. Although we have royal blood, most of our people can't even activate the demon armor. Like me, the demon armor can cover 1/3 of my body. Even if my body can't even support the weight of the demon armor, it's enough for me to be a tribal elder. Therefore, you don't have to worry about us, the remnants of the demon race, provoking the great war of immortals and demons. We don't have that strength at all. Right now, we just hope to live peacefully, that's all." Wang Lu frowned. These words sounded unimaginable. The former royal family of the demon world had now become a livestock plaything? Tiske, if he hadn't seen the current tragedy of the demon world with his own eyes, as well as the mountain of hundreds of millions of demon race corpses, he would not believe that the powerful race that had once plunged the 9 regions into a crisis of extinction twice would actually fall to this point. However, this was very likely to be the truth. While they were talking, some curious demons passed by nearby. Without exception, they all showed signs of exhaustion. Even though most of them knew how to use spells and their bloodline also contained magical ability, they had no fighting power at all. They were indeed like a group of pigs and dogs waiting to be slaughtered. At this time, the demon race elder continued, "A few days ago, it was the day when the tribal priest went to the altar to carry out the blood sacrifice. As a result, we were accidentally seen by them and mistakenly thought that we could control the sandstorm with evil method. They mistakenly entered the altar area and didn't carry out the blood sacrifice, so some of them were cursed. Fortunately, at that time, the invisible devil had just eaten its fill and had no intention to pursue the matter. Otherwise, I'm afraid that before my tribe's poison-extracting doctor could do it, their flesh and blood would melt. At that time, it would be even more unclear." At this point, the 2 letters from Feng Yin could be explained. Wang Lu sneered and said, "Yes, fortunately, the most extreme situation didn't happen. Otherwise, I wouldn't even give you the chance to speak." Even if the question was solved, Wang Lu's attitude still seemed aggressive. It was true that the calm attitude of this old demon race man was enough to dispel most people's doubts. At least, Ouyang Shang gradually put down his hostile attitude. However, for Wang Lu, no amount of proof was more convincing than the established history of the golden generation had died in the hands of the demon race. The elder of the demon race was not angered by this. "All of this is indeed our own fault. If we had explained everything to you earlier, those 2 wouldn't have been poisoned and almost lost their lives." Feng Yin could not help but say, "Elder, this is not your fault. After all, we are just outsiders. At that time, our 2 races didn't even speak the same language, so how could we expect you to tell us the tribal secret? It was us who were too reckless at that time." Feng Yin's complete defection made Wang Lu frown, thinking, "I can't believe you, this old thing, was such a fool 100 years ago." But on the other hand, it also forced Wang Lu to think about a problem. Could it be that the devils in the desert were really innocent? After all, in the end, Wang Lu did not know the truth of the complete annihilation of the Golden Generation. He could only basically conclude that it was related to the demon race. However, the demon race in the world might not be the only one in this desert oasis. With this group of scum who had lost all their fighting power, it was impossible for them to bring such a big loss to the Lingjian school. With the current clues, Wang Lu still could not come to a strong conclusion, but he could at least be sure of one thing. In that case, we will take our leave first. Thank you for taking care of my spirit sword sect during this period of time. If there is a chance in the future, I will definitely repay you. With that, Wang Lu directly ordered Feng Yin, gather the team and leave immediately. Feng Yin was taken aback. Leave immediately? Otherwise, do you also want to be raised as a livestock by the invisible devil? I know that you feel that these demons have done you a favor, so you should repay them, but there's no need to put your life on the line here. You have to know that the sect's nurturing is the first thing. Wang Lu's words immediately made Feng Yin speechless. And that demon race elder just faintly sighed and silently nodded. It could be seen that he did seem to have a little expectation for the cultivators of Spirit Sword sect, like a drowning man catching a straw. However, he also knew that it was just a fantasy. How could a group of young people with the highest cultivation base of King Pill contend against that invisible devil? Therefore, even though things seemed to be very hasty, Feng Yin still gathered all the disciples of Spirit Sword sect in the tribe and prepared to leave. Even Zhang Sheng and Wang Chenai, who were full of spirit, rushed over. The poison extraction technique of the demon race poison extracting physicians was indeed powerful. After seeing Ouyang Shang and Wang Lu, most of the disciples seemed to be pleasantly surprised and quickly agreed to leave with them, except for one person. Big brother, senior brother Wang Lu, I'm sorry but I can't go with you. The one who spoke was Zhang Sheng. This young cultivator was like a sharp sword, exuding a sharp temperament all over his body. His sword intent was so pure that Wang Lu couldn't help but praise it. Such a sword intent was perhaps comparable to Lu Li. It's just that, this IQ seems to be comparable to little Lu Li. Can't go with us? Are you planning to settle down here? His fellow disciples also looked at him curiously. Ouyang Shang said, tell me the reason. Zhang Sheng slightly frowned, seemingly having some difficulty organizing his words. After a moment of silence, he said in a sinking voice, because my heart has already stayed here. What? Then he saw Zhang Sheng turn his head. Under a palm tree not far away, a graceful woman was silently watching him. Wang Lu remembered very clearly that she was the poison extracting physician who performed the poison extraction technique on Zhang Sheng. Big brother, senior brother Wang Lu, I can't leave her alone, so I'm sorry I can't go. After saying these words, Zhang Sheng gently breathed a sigh of relief. The people around him were petrified. Can't leave her alone? Did this guy fall in love with that demon race doctor? Just because the two of them have had a one-night stand? This, Ouyang Shang. In the silence, Wang Lu roared, stepped forward and grabbed Ouyang Shang's collar. Look at what you've done. When everyone was curious about what this had to do with Ouyang Shang, Wang Lu angrily said, I've already told you to find a mermaid in Blessed Fountain. Send the video to this group of stupid virgins who have never seen meat to improve their taste. But you're so reserved. Now it's fun, right? You've been seduced by a native girl. Chapter 498. In the end, the team did not leave. Zhang Sheng stubbornly insisted on staying here to live and die together with the poison-extracting physician. Even if Ouyang Shang came forward to persuade him, he could not be swayed. Wang Lu deeply admired the spirit of such a stubborn person, so he was ready to give him a special package for stubborn people, namely forced demolition, and forced demolition. Damn it, showing affection without breaking up? Believe it or not, I will burn you two adulterous couple with a fire? But soon Ouyang Shang gave him an explanation, so Wang Lu had to regretfully put down the torch in his hand. It turned out that this junior brother Zhang Sheng was gifted, born with an extreme temperament, and the cultivation method he practiced was also emotion sword. This emotion sword was found by the elders of the Lingjian school by chance. It was said that it was the inheritance of the ancient immortals. In the glorious years before the Age of Chaos, there was a sword cultivator who broke through and ascended to immortality, who used this emotion sword to construct the entire cultivation system. The so-called emotion sword was to focus on emotion and sword. Only by reaching the extreme of emotion could one reach the extreme of the sword. If this set of sword technique was practiced by a person with an extreme temperament, its power could be described as earth-shattering. In terms of cultivation time, this junior brother Zhang Sheng was quite shallow in the Golden Generation, but his cultivation base had already reached the peak of Shudan stage. This cultivation speed was not inferior to Ouyang Shang's. If Wang Lu had not had a fortuitous encounter in the Grand Cloud Mountain and received the 1,000-year ripple from the Grand Cloud Fairy, it was feared that his cultivation speed would be similar to his. Of course, no matter how talented a disciple was, if he was not obedient and did not abide by the rules of the school, he was not worth cultivating. However, Zhang Xing had always been diligent and conscientious. Coupled with his good talent, his cultivation speed was fast enough, and his popularity in the school was excellent. This time, his stubbornness was the first time he had been in the Lingjian school for decades. Moreover, he was stubborn because of emotion, which was something that people who practiced the emotion sword could not help. At this time, even if he was really lit a torch, he would only be stubborn in the raging fire until the last moment. Therefore, Wang Lu was a little hesitant as to whether he should be so decisive or not. Although the merciful should not lead an army, and as a team leader he should act rationally and decisively, but a qualified leader should not be crude and simple. Zhang Sheng's situation was complicated, and it did not allow for a quick and messy way of dealing with it. Just as Wang Lu was considering how to subtly make Zhang Xing give up this absurd relationship, Zhang Sheng took the initiative to attack. He bent his knees and fell to his knees. Eldest senior brother, you've always been omnipotent. Please help them. Junior brother Zhang Yu? Everyone present was dumbfounded. Zhang Sheng cultivated the emotion sword, and his temperament was as cold and arrogant as a sword. Even when facing the elders of his sect, he was neither servile nor overbearing. But now he actually took the initiative to kneel down and beg for help. This was simply unimaginable. To be able to make this sword-like man bend his knees, it could be seen that for emotion sword cultivators, the power of love was enough to bend straight men. At the same time, Zhang Sheng's kneeling also made the surrounding people start to waver. Previously they really got along very well with the desert demons. These demons were gentle and generous, enthusiastic and hardy, completely dispelling the cruel and heartless imprint of the Great War of Immortals and Demons. Lingjian school was not obsessed with the distinction between immortals and demons, and these disciples would not become irreconcilable enemies just because the other party was a demon. Compared to the blood feud 2,000 years ago, they cared more about the simple kindness they felt in the short time they spent together. Not to mention that these demons had saved their lives. Now, knowing their situation, they still wanted to escape. This was not the behavior of a gentleman. Of course, for these ordinary disciples, it was enough to consider this step. After all, the information they had was not sufficient. And for the two people who could really decide whether to stay or leave, they had to consider the problem more thoroughly. Junior brother Wang Lu, what do you think about these desert demons? Looking at the current situation, it's completely impossible to see that they are the culprits who caused the tragedy. I've cultivated for decades and experienced a lot of things, so I still have this little bit of insight. But the problem is, they are demons after all. That's right, they are demons after all. Ouyang Shang nodded. If I was alone without a transmigrator like you, I would definitely choose to stand by and watch. Junior brother Zhang Sheng cultivates the emotion sword. In fact, the sect has long thought that there might be a day when they have to sacrifice him. The other junior brothers and sisters have not experienced the wind and waves, so they are soft-hearted, but it's not the first time I've been a villain. Wang Lu frowned. In other words, leaving is more likely to return to the historical line of the past? Junior brother Wang Lu, have you ever thought of such a possibility? Perhaps it's because I once simply left in the past that I let go of a certain risk point? Wang Lu answered, for example, the invisible demons? That's right. Otherwise, with just these demons, I don't think they can force me into a dead end, even if the whole city is disguised. There were about 1,000 demons in the desert oasis, but these 1,000 demons were all mediocre livestock. Even if they swarmed Ouyang Shang, it was impossible for them to do anything to Ouyang Shang. It was even more impossible for the Golden Generation to be annihilated along with the elders of the sect. Throughout the entire savage land, there was no known existence that could do this. 100 years ago, when the elders of Spirit Sword sect were picking herbs in the savage land, legend has it that they encountered an unusually powerful monster, but it was at most a supreme of unity stage. That elder could not resist it, but he was able to retreat safely, so there was no absolute gap in strength. Only the invisible demon could have such power. Wang Lu said, the invisible demon is indeed the biggest doubt, but do you think that's a problem that can be solved by you and me, Taoist Master King Pill? Ouyang Shang said, of course not. If it can be solved, there's no reason why I can't solve it in the past. Then do you want to consider asking for help from the sect? In the original historical line, the elders of the sect were all annihilated, right? If they can solve the problem, how could they be annihilated? Then what about expanding the scope of asking for help, such as telling the existence of these demons to Xingjing sect? That group of Xingjing sect people who abhor evil will definitely use weapons of mass destruction to raze the entire desert to the ground. But it's also possible that it's not just Lingjian school that will be annihilated. You should know that the elders of the sect today are not easy to deal with. Moreover, in my historical line, the savage land was eventually occupied by the Black Tide, which is an existence that no sect can contend with alone. Therefore, it's not that the problem can be solved by asking for help from the elders of the sect. Moreover, it may make the problem worse. For example, perhaps the key to solve this invisible demon lies in the desert demons. After all, they have delayed the invisible demon for 2,000 years with their flesh and blood sacrifice. But if they rashly attract the outsiders, they would kill the demons as soon as they see them, which would instead strangle the only hope and lead to tragedy. Wang Lu and Ouyang Shang spoke one after another. It was not like who asked and who answered. It was more like they were talking to themselves as they discussed the problem. And the result of the discussion was to stay here. Since no matter what we choose there's no guarantee of safety, it's better to stay here and take the initiative. Therefore, after some discussion, the two of them made a joint decision to stay. When they told this news to Feng Yin and the others, they got a deafening cheer. Big brother, I know you're the best. Haha, with Big brother's appearance, that invisible demon is about to die. Seeing the indulgence of his junior brothers and sisters, Ouyang Shang could only wryly smile. It was not because of anything else but because, in such a short period of time, how much favorability did these demons pull up? This group of people had clearly already stood on the side of the demon race. After a long time the cheers subsided. Let's go back and welcome Big Brother. Oh yes, and Senior Brother Wang. Regarding the identity of Wang Lu, Feng Yin didn't explain too much detail. He only said that the sect leader sent him to participate in the management training program. His strength and qualification were the top at that time, and he was the greatest hope of the sect in the future. Although Feng Yin and the others were skeptical, seeing that their big brother was not joking, they accepted this setting for the time being. After entertaining Ouyang Shang and Wang Lu, they found that there seemed to be another person here, a person with an unusually thin sense of existence. Hey junior sister Wang Wu, why are you here? When Wang Wu heard someone asked, she gently opened her eyes and stopped the endless magical power circulation in her jade mansion. She somewhat impatiently opened her eyes, uttered an M sound, and then closed her eyes to continue her cultivation. This kind of stubbornness towards cultivation was simply outrageous. The cultivator of Spirit Sword sect who asked the question was also not surprised. He smiled bitterly and shrugged his shoulders, not caring much about it. Ouyang Shang took the initiative to come forward and explain, I brought her here to broaden her horizons. Oh, it turns out that Big Brother personally took care of her. Junior sister Wang Wu is really lucky. The young cultivator who spoke repeatedly clicked his tongue and looked at Wang Wu with an envious look, as if envious that she could get the favor of their big brother. Wang Lu also clicked his tongue in wonder. It seemed that his master and Ouyang Shang's affair seemed to have been going on for a long time. She didn't know what virtue or ability she had that she could actually win the favor of a peerless genius who was on par with her in all aspects. The current Wang Wu was not the #1 king pill in 9 regions 150 years later. At this time, whether it was her figure, appearance, temperament or cultivation base, all of them were unknown. Compared with the radiant Ouyang Shang, they were simply two extremes. To say that she could attract the attention of Ouyang Shang was simply like the plot of a literary work. In this way, in fact, Wang Wu already had the capital to make a fortune. She could completely adapt her early experience into a novel called Overbearing Senior Brother Falls in Love with Me, attract the audience with a Cinderella love story, and finally create a tragic ending with the eruption of a black tide. It was simply a perfect love story which would certainly be popular in 9 regions, and the royalties would be earned until menstrual disorders. While thinking like this, Wang Lu took Wang Wu's hand and followed the others into the city built by the demon race in the desert oasis, and began a new round of exploration. Formless demon, let me see your true form. Chapter 499. After entering the desert oasis, Wang Lu found that the city had been completely branded by the invisible devil. As the nightmare that had enveloped the demon race for 2,000 years, it was almost everywhere. For example, on the day of the welcoming banquet personally arranged by the demon race elder, Wang Lu saw such a scene. Thank the gods for giving us food. At the dining table, several elderly demons with extraordinary statuses were praying devoutly with their eyes closed before the meal, and in the end, they expressed their gratitude to the gods in a loud and clear voice. At that time Wang Lu found it strange. Thank the gods? There was actually a god among the demon race? Of course, in a strict sense, the demon race certainly had a god, the devil god. Just like the 9 regions had true immortals and the western continent had gods, the demon race also had their most powerful person, which was called the devil god. However, just like the cultivators of 9 regions would not worship their ancestor true immortals, the demon race would not make the devil god into a totem and pray to it every day. Based on his understanding of the demon race, at least the royal family of the demon race was a group of non-believers, because they themselves were the supreme of the demon world, the place where the faith of millions of people gathered. So now, who was this group of royal family descendants thanking to? Alas, it's that invisible devil. The tribal elder sitting next to Wang Lu somewhat bitterly sighed, and then used a secret spell to transmit his voice, since more than 1,000 years ago, when the last group of the tribe's radical rebels were killed by the invisible devil, the people in the tribe completely gave up resistance. And in the following hundreds of years, gradually, some people even put down their dignity. They were awed by the powerful force of the invisible devil and were willing to worship it as a god, day and night. And now, the number of these people is increasing and soon more than 20% of the tribe has been occupied. Wang Lu nodded. It's Stockholm Syndrome. You guys can persist for more than 1,000 years before the surrender party occupied 20%, which is indeed worthy of being a royal family. After more than 1,000 years of high-pressure rule, if it were a creature like a pig or a dog, it would have long been completely domesticated and lost its wild nature. Now, it was commendable that more than half of the people in this demon race tribe could still maintain their independent personality. However, it seemed that this tribe was about to reach their limit. There were more than 30 people from the demon race who attended the banquet that day. As a result, more than 10 people excitedly came over to ask Wang Lu and Ouyang Shang if they had the ability to help them out of their predicament. Obviously, they regarded these 2 outsiders as their life-saving straw. Some of them even knelt on the ground and kowtowed to Ouyang Shang in their agitation, making the banquet a complete mess. In the end, the tribe's great elder flew into a rage. He grabbed these people by the neck and threw them out of the dining hall. Only then did the atmosphere calm down. However, the celebratory atmosphere on the dining table was also gone. However, the cultivators of Spirit Sword sect themselves did not enjoy this welcoming banquet. The material conditions of the desert demons were really too difficult. Even though the great elder had tried everything, the dishes on the table were still simple and shabby. Most of them were native plants that grew in the oasis. The taste was rough as if it was mixed with sand. There was also a small amount of artificially raised livestock meat, but the processing methods were very immature, and the quantity was so small that it couldn't even be placed on the dining table. For the cultivators of Spirit Sword sect who were used to eating normal food, although it was not difficult to swallow, they really could not enjoy it. Especially when they realized that the tribe was on the verge of collapse under the oppression of the invisible devil, it was even more depressing and greatly reduced their appetite. In fact, no one at the banquet was in the mood to eat at all. Even Wang Lu only drank 2 mouthfuls of juice and then fell into deep thought. On the dining table, there was only one corner that constantly made the sound of food being chewed and swallowed, and that was Wang Wu. While accelerating the magical power circulation in her jade mansion, she mechanically put the food on the table into her mouth. Actually, she didn't know the taste at all. However, until the end of the banquet, at least 1/5 of the entire table of dishes had entered her stomach, including 2 small plates and a soup spoon. After the banquet, Ouyang Shang and Wang Lu followed Feng Yin and the others to their residence to settle down. After briefly explaining to their junior brothers and sisters, the 2 of them went out for a night tour of the oasis and began to separately carry out a field investigation. Although they could also listen to Feng Yin or the demon race elders to introduce them, second-hand information was, after all, not as good as first-hand information. In particular, the next opponent was an unfathomable opponent. Any oversight in information could cause fatal results. The efficiency of the 2 of them was very high. After one day they had roughly figured out the situation of the demon race city. In the tent where the cultivators of Spirit Sword sect rested, Wang Lu began to explain his harvest to the crowd. The population of this demon race tribe is not large, only about 1,100. Most of them are young adults and very few of them are elderly. Because the invisible devil needs continuous blood sacrifice to quell the curse, Most of the demons will actively choose to sacrifice themselves when they get old in order to maintain the interests of the tribe. At the same time, this special living environment makes the members of this tribe very different from the royal family of the demon world during the Great War of Immortal and Demon. First of all, the average lifespan is greatly shortened. The theoretical lifespan of the general royal family of the demon world is more than 500 years, which does not take into account any acquired cultivation data. If they diligently cultivate, their strength will continue to improve, and their lifespan will also be extended. At the level of the king of the demon world, they usually live as long as the world and will not die naturally. In general, it should be a race that lives longer than human beings. But the average lifespan of the demons in this oasis is only 40 years old. Right now, the tribe's great elder is the oldest person in the tribe, and this year he is 62 years old. When Wang Lu said this, he looked at the people who had fallen into dead silence, and the corner of his mouth curled up. In other words, most of the people here are actually older than him. Damn, I've always respected him as an elder. The several cultivators of Spirit Sword sect were both angry and amused. However, Wang Lu quickly changed the subject. But you actually have good reason to respect him. Because if you put him in the human world, he is a peerless genius who has reached Yuaning stage in 60 years of cultivation. At least he would not lose to any of you. What? Yuaning stage? Feng Yin and the others were inexplicably surprised. I can't feel it at all. Although the sand molding spell is very beautiful, but... Wait a minute, to be precise, although his power is weak, his ingenious use of the surrounding spiritual energy is indeed far better than ours. Previously, I thought it was their innate magical ability as the desert natives, but now that I think about it, since they are demons, how could they have the desert magical ability? It's clear that their stage is extremely high, but they are limited by their own lack of power. The people present were, after all, the elites of Spirit Sword sect. After being pointed out by Wang Lu, they immediately came to their senses. And further thinking, under such harsh conditions, reaching Yuaning stage in 60 years? If it were you guys, could you do it? Feng Yin and the others were silent. Obviously they had no confidence in this. Although there is only one great elder in this tribe, the royal family of the demon world is indeed the royal family of the demon world. Even after 2,000 years of deterioration, there are still geniuses in the tribe. If the next step is to fight against the invisible devil, the power of these natives is indispensable. Speaking to this, the topic was continued by Ouyang Shang. In fact, these demons have not achieved nothing in the past 2,000 years. How to resist the invisible devil has formed a set of strict methods, which runs through every little bit of their life. A disciple of Spirit Sword sect sneered and said, "Do they worship it like a god and worship it 3 times a day?" Ouyang Shang couldn't laugh but sternly said, "After 2,000 years of hopeless resistance, only 20% of them gave up resistance. If it were a human, do you think they could do it?" Wang Lu said, "In fact, this desert tribe has been implementing a set of desperate resistance plan for 2,000 years. Among the 1,000 tribesmen, some of them with exceptional talent would be selected to take on a special mission. These people are called kindling. From the moment they were born, the tribal elders would draw a curse mark on their body. That curse mark has no other effect, but it could deceive the devil's perception, so that it could not detect the existence of this person. Then the tribe would do its best to cultivate these kindling, and when they become adults they would try to leave the oasis." Ouyang Shang said, "Once these trapped demons are far away from the oasis, they would trigger the devil's curse and die without a burial place. However, they have developed a kind of curse mark that could deceive the devil's perception, trying to deceive the devil. Once it succeeds, it means that someone in the tribe can get rid of the devil's shackles, and from then on, enter the sea like a fish." Feng Yin asked, "But only a few people can be saved, what about the others?" Wang Lu explained, "The effect of the curse mark is limited. It's impossible to draw it on 1,000 people and migrate them out together. In fact, after 2,000 years, they haven't even succeeded in sending out a kindling. The best record was set by the current Great Elder. He was discovered by the devil when he was 50 kilometers away from the oasis. Later, he was lucky enough to survive in the sandstorm and comprehend this sand-shaping spell. However, he was still far from escaping from the devil's control. Then what's the point of this? The point is that this is their only hope. At the same time, it's also the key to our next move." Wang Lu said, "The curse mark can deceive the devil's perception. The closer it is to the devil, the more effective it is. 1,000 years ago, the devil race had done a radical experiment. They sent the kindling with the curse mark to the scene of the blood sacrifice, and deliberately appeared when the devil descended. The devil turned a blind eye to it. Hearing this, Feng Yin and others had already vaguely guessed the plan of Wang Lu and Ouyang Shang, but the audacity of the idea made them feel unbelievable. Then they heard Ouyang Shang say, "So the next step, we plan to use this curse mark to personally go to the devil's habitat to explore. Always know yourself and know the enemy, only then can you win 100 battles." "Big brother, this is too risky," Feng Yin immediately advised. Wang Lu sneered, "Then why don't you go?" Of course Wang Lu knew the risks of this move, but what else could they do? If they could stand by and not take the risk, he and Ouyang Shang would not stay at all. The problem was that after weighing the pros and cons, facing the invisible devil was actually the most rational choice. Then on this basis, the existence of the curse mark was a positive factor that forced them to take the risk. With such a good condition, what were they waiting for? Chapter 500. Early the next morning, Wang Lu and Ouyang Shang found the great elder of the tribe and directly made a request. Curse? The great elder was having breakfast in the tent, a plate of light vegetable soup. When he heard the request of the two, he drank the soup on the spot. How do you know about the existence of the curse? For this desert tribe, the curse could be regarded as an absolute secret. It was their only hope now. It was highly confidential, but they heard it from the mouth of an outsider who had only been here for a day. Wang Lu laughed. "What a joke, let professional adventurers walk around your city for a whole day, do you still expect to have any privacy left?" Ouyang Shang persuaded, "Junior brother Wang Lu, what you said sounds like a pervert." "Senior brother Ouyang, you sound like I'm not a pervert." The great elder stared at Wang Lu seriously. After a long time he sighed, "Since you already know, then forget it. But you need us to provide the curse to observe the demon closely? I can't accept this request." Wang Lu said, "Are you afraid of taking risks and being implicated by us? Then why did you let us in the first place?" The great elder pondered and did not speak. Obviously it was difficult to make a decision. Of course he was prepared to take risks when he invited these outsiders in, but it had only been a day and it had progressed to the point where he had to face the invisible demon. This was really beyond his expectations. Unfortunately, Wang Lu did not intend to give him any buffer time. "It doesn't matter if you don't want to provide the curse, we can just run naked. According to my understanding, the invisible demon is not sensitive to creatures other than the demon race. For 2,000 years, the desert has welcomed many visitors from the outside world. They can come and go freely, and even approaching the desert oasis will not easily trigger the curse. We just need to be careful not to trigger the sand poison. Then I'll take my leave." After saying that, Wang Lu turned around and was about to leave, but how could the great elder let him go like this? Not to mention that the two of them were the only ray of hope that the great elder had been guarding for many years. Even if he did not care about their lives, if they provoked the demon and caused the curse to break out, then the whole tribe would suffer. "You want the curse? Sure, but at least give me a day to prepare." "Will it take that long? Isn't half a day enough?" Seeing that the great elder's gloomy face was starting to darken, Wang Lu realized that he had probably stepped on the other party's bottom line. "All right, see you tomorrow." The next day Wang Lu and Ouyang Shang visited the great elder's tent again. But this time, there were two more people in the tent besides the great elder. They were two old men with wrinkles all over their faces, and their auras of life were almost undetectable. Their ages should be around 50, and they were the elders of the tribe. The great elder's expression was even more gloomy than before. When he saw Wang Lu and Yi Zichen arrive, he snorted and said, "Then prepare to begin." Then the two people beside the first elder suddenly pulled out their sabers, and a cold light flashed. Wang Lu was shocked. The great elder had prepared for a whole day just for this? Smashing the cup as a signal and sending 500 executioners to ambush him? The problem was, these two weak old men in front of him, were they even worthy of being executioners? It was true that there was no lack of geniuses in this tribe. In terms of realms alone, there were 20 to 30 people who were above the king pill level among 1,000 people. But in terms of actual combat strength, Wang Lu alone was enough to massacre this city more than 10 times over. Violence was simply stupid. But in the next moment, the two old men turned their sabers and directly slashed at their own necks. Moreover, the way they exerted their strength was very strange. With one slash, their entire heads were actually cut off. Looking at the two fountains of blood that shot up into the sky, Wang Lu frowned and asked Ouyang Shang, "Could this be black magic?" "I think you must have misunderstood. Black magic doesn't make one's own head fall off. But Ouyang Shang could not figure out what the other party was thinking. To cut off one's own head as soon as they met, there was probably no such strange greeting in the world. But very quickly he understood the other party's intentions. The great elder's expression was gloomy. He spread his arms and gathered his strength. The fountains of blood that shot up into the sky were pulled by an invisible force into countless thin streams and drew complex patterns in the air. This is a curse mark? Seeing this scene, even the slowest person could realize the truth. It turned out that the demon race's curse mark was drawn with human head blood. No wonder the great elder had a difficult expression when he asked for the curse mark, and now his expression was also very ugly. The great elder used his exquisite magic power to control the human head blood in the air to draw an incomparably complex and exquisite pattern. Then, with a muffled groan, the blood pattern flickered a few times in the air and disappeared. Ouyang Shang and Wang Lu felt their wrists heat up and a miniature pattern was printed on them. After drawing the curse mark, the great elder seemed very tired. Next, do what you should do. I thought it was something for sex. After wearing the curse mark, the two of them didn't feel any different from before. They tried to analyze the secret of the curse mark using various methods, but they could only feel a weak and mysterious power condensed in the curse mark. When they analyzed it specifically, it was somewhat similar to a garbled code. There was no practical meaning. How exactly could the demon race avoid the invisible demon's perception through such a garbled QR code printed on their wrists? No matter how they tried, they couldn't understand. But considering that the invisible demon's main body was still unknown, perhaps its perception method was completely outside of common sense, they could only accept this setting for the time being. In short, after accepting the curse mark, the two of them prepared to go to the invisible demon's habitat. In the center of the city, there was a majestic and imposing temple. The tribe's blood sacrifice and other rituals were all held in the temple. This temple, built from pure white rock, was particularly eye-catching in the city full of tents and straw mats. It was like a crane in a flock of chickens. It was hard to imagine how frugal the people here were in order to gather the resources to build this temple. And the invisible demon's influence in this city was also evident. At the same time, it was easy to have a fanciful thought. How afraid of the invisible demon are these demons, that they would waste so much resources to build this temple? But as he approached closer, the stone carvings surrounding the outer walls of the temple clearly recorded the indomitable spirit of the demons. Each of the carvings recorded a fellow tribesman who died because of resistance, even if he was just an insignificant commoner before his death. Over the past 2,000 years, such murals had accumulated in the tens of thousands. Perhaps when they were building this magnificent palace, the demons had realized that this would be a long and endless struggle, so they left enough space to record those brave martyrs. Unfortunately, after 2,000 years, the outer walls of the magnificent temple were finally about to be used up, and the invisible demon was still so tyrannical that people couldn't see any hope of liberation. Pushing open the door of the hall, they saw that it was deserted inside. There were only a few pale-faced priests. After seeing Wang Lu and Ouyang Shang, they indifferently nodded and then pulled open the stone door that led deeper into the hall. Going all the way down the passage behind the stone door, the surrounding air changed from hot to cold. The passage under their feet was spiraling all the way down. After walking for about a few hundred meters, a door appeared at the end of the passage. The door was covered with runes drawn by blood, and the blood was still flowing slowly under the drive of a mysterious force, reflecting the light of the torches on both sides of the passage. The power of the blood seal on the door was much stronger than the seal on Ouyang Shang's and Wang Lu's wrists, and its function was simple and clear: to prevent all unauthorized people from entering the door to avoid angering the demon. Behind the door was the altar where the desert demons held the blood sacrifice ceremony, and it was also the closest place to the demon's body in the entire oasis city. Every once in a while, the tribal high priest would preside over the blood sacrifice here, gathering the old and weak people in the tribe to sacrifice to the demon. Of course, there were times when the demons would ask for some sacrifices, but the scope of the request was completely random. Sometimes it would be an elder with a high position in the tribe, and sometimes it would be an ordinary mortal. Every time this happened, the tribe would be accompanied by life and death. Outside of the time of the blood sacrifice, this door would basically not be opened, and with the power of these demons, it was impossible to break the blood seal by force, so it was usually safe. However, this safety lock was not so absolute for people outside the oasis. A few days ago, after Feng Yin and others cracked the blood seal on the door, they sneaked in and peeped at the blood sacrifice. They mistakenly thought that the desert demons had the ability to control the sandstorm. Even Feng Yin could crack the door lock, so it was even easier for Ouyang Shang and Wang Lu. Ouyang Shang didn't even touch the blood seal. He just reached out and pressed on Wang Lu's shoulder, and the next moment the two appeared behind the door. He used a very clever earth-escaping technique. There was an empty space behind the door, and in the middle of the circular space, there was a huge, blood-stained altar. The two walked to the front of the altar, and then closed their breath to concentrate, further converging and suppressing the fluctuations of their magical power. Even their breathing stopped and their body temperature dropped as if they were dead. What they had to do next was a feat that no one in the demon race had tried for 2,000 years. Even with the protection of the seal, they had to be careful. The two of them opened the altar. The heavy, huge stone in the hands of the two Taoist masters of King Pil was lifted up from the ground like a straw. The whole process was quiet and silent. All the falling gravel and debris were wrapped and melted by Ouyang Shang's gentle and subtle power. Under the altar was a bottomless pit. According to the legend of the demon race, the demon's body was under the cave. It was just that, except for the first group of heroes 2,000 years ago, no one could see his posture. After the first group of heroes rushed into the cave, none of them could escape. At that time, the demon race was not as weak as it was today. When the entrance of the cave was revealed, Ouyang Shang and Wang Lu only felt a gust of cold wind blowing on their faces. They could not help but raise their vigilance to the extreme. Wang Lu's non-phase sword qi wandered around his body to ensure that he was immune to poison. But the next moment, their tense nerves snapped. "Yo, it's two little guys I've never seen before." The voice that suddenly rang in their ears made the two Taoist masters of King Pil, who were accustomed to wind and waves, feel shocked. Chapter 501. Before entering the temple, Ouyang Shang and Wang Lu had imagined countless possibilities. Of course, there was the possibility of being discovered by the devil and having to confront it head-on. However, the two of them really didn't expect that their whereabouts would be seen as soon as they opened the door, and they didn't expect that they would hear a gentle greeting. Moreover, it vaguely sounded like a female voice. Under this sudden change, the two of them reacted very quickly. Wang Lu took the lead and said, "Good morning, we are human cultivators from Spirit Sword Mountain in Blue River region. We heard that there is a highly respected and infinitely powerful senior here, so we sincerely and cautiously came to pay our respects." "Oh, interesting little guy." In the cave, the gentle voice sounded again. "Answer our two questions, little guys." Wang Lu and Ouyang Shang could not help but frown. The demon in the cave seemed to speak in a leisurely manner, but each word contained a magical power that caused one's heart to tremble. If it weren't for the fact that the two of them weren't ordinary golden core cultivators, then just hearing these two sentences from her would likely cause their minds to collapse and they would be at the mercy of others. However, it was fortunate that the devil did not immediately kill them. Although the current situation was still not optimistic, there was always room for mediation if they could talk. Whether it was Ouyang Shang or Wang Lu, their eloquence was quite brilliant. "Please go ahead." Ouyang Shang responded gracefully, and at the same time he took half a step forward, shielding Wang Lu behind him. Wang Lu could not understand. In terms of comprehensive strength, Ouyang Shang and he were basically on par, but in terms of defense he was more than a notch stronger than Ouyang Shang. How could it be Ouyang Shang's turn to be a meat shield? But now was obviously not the time to argue. "The first question: if you came here because of the reputation and have no other intention, why did you paint those ridiculous graffiti on your body? Tsk, that disgusting smell of blood can wake people up from their sleep." Wang Lu and Ouyang Shang inwardly cursed at the same time. One of the reasons why they boldly came here was that they had 70 to 80% confidence that they could deceive the heavens. Now, it seemed that it had the opposite effect, digging his own grave. Could it be that the old demon was playing a very big game of chess? It didn't make sense. They trusted the Great Elder's incantation because there was no benefit for the devil race to falsify it. Even if this move could kill Ouyang Shang and Wang Lu, would the awakened demon still reward them? What was the point of making both sides suffer? However, this was clearly not the time to bicker with the Great Elder of the demon race. Ouyang Shang suppressed the shock in his heart and calmly replied, "Because we don't want to disturb your sweet dream. I heard from the natives that this incantation can conceal one's body, so we asked them to draw this incantation for us. Unfortunately, we seem to have been deceived by them." "They didn't lie to you. Those ridiculous bugs really thought that their graffiti could fool our noses. Then, it seemed that every once in a while, they would choose someone to paint on and try to sneak out of our circle. I was bored from sleeping, so I kept playing with them. In the end, they took it more and more seriously. I've had a lot of fun these past few years. At this time, Ouyang Shang and Wang Lu already couldn't even say fuck. They had really overestimated the ability of this group of demons. The incantation that they regarded as their only hope was actually a joke from the beginning. And for this joke they had struggled for 2,000 years. Thinking of the palace engraved with countless portraits of martyrs above their heads. Thinking of the sacrifice of a life every time the incantation was drawn in the tribe. Thinking of the hope that had united the hearts of the people for generations. It really made them speechless. The weak were prey to the strong, this was the natural order of the world. For the weak, bravery, wisdom, tenacity. These good virtues could only be used for self-indulgence and self-entertainment. The strong only needed a finger to turn everything into nothingness. However, now was not the time to feel sorry for the devil race. Because that invisible demon opened his mouth again. In any case, little guys, answer my second question. Since you have already disturbed me, how should I torture you as entertainment after the resuscitation? As soon as his voice fell, a strong cold wind rose from the cave. In an instant, whether it was Ouyang Shang's protective sword chi or Wang Lu's non-phase sword defense, both were fragmented. Ouyang Shang immediately reached into his bosom to take out his life-saving props, while Wang Lu sank his primordial spirit into his jade mansion, ready to make a desperate blow. However, in the end he was still a step too late because the two of them, from their corporeal body to their primordial spirit, were completely frozen by the cold wind. That invisible demon just breathed out a mouthful of cold air from afar, which made the two top-notch Taoist Master King Pill completely lose the ability to resist. If the cold wind blew for a while, the two of them would undoubtedly be blown away, and their souls would scatter. However, the other party didn't seem to be in a hurry to kill them. The cold wind disappeared in a flash, but when the wind subsided, the two of them lost all their strength and fell to the ground. Being in a desperate situation could not dispel their fighting spirit. Ouyang Shang immediately tried to say, "You can tell us a story." "Tell us a story?" The demon in the cave was a bit curious. "Why should I tell you a story?" "Because we are really interested in listening." Ouyang Shang's answer was obviously irrelevant, but in fact he was betting on the invisible demon's desire to talk. If she didn't have a strong desire to talk, why would she talk so much to them? Previously she played with the demon race for 2,000 years like a cat playing with a mouse, but she almost never said a word to them. There must be a reason behind this. Therefore, at this moment Ouyang Shang tried his best to seize this point to fight for a chance of survival. And then he won the bet. "Oh, you're really interested in listening?" This sentence doesn't sound like a lie. My ears tell me that you two are about to die, but you're really interested in listening to a story. Hee, for 2,000 years little guys like you are really rare. So, as a reward before you die, let me tell you a story. The demon's story was very simple. More than 2,000 years ago she encountered a powerful opponent. After a fierce battle, she was defeated. The opponent did not kill her, but imprisoned her in a barren place, and then used a secret technique to extract her power for his own use. However, the opponent underestimated the demon's strength. She was caught off guard and was defeated. Once she came back to her senses, the strength of the backlash was far beyond the opponent's expectations. The opponent was afraid of her power, and created an unbreakable cage. The cage itself was flawless, but that person was too greedy and left behind a spirit formation that could absorb energy in the cage. This created a flaw in the cage. After decades of recuperation, the demon accumulated vitality, and while the opponent was dealing with a big difficulty, she used the power absorption spell in reverse, and directly injured him. But that was only a loss for both sides. Although the powerful opponent was suppressed by her after being seriously injured, she herself also suffered the backlash of the spell, and was injured even more deeply. At this time she suddenly found that above the cage that was suppressing her, there was a tribe left by the powerful opponent, and immediately became the target of her anger. That tribe was considered quite strong by general standards, but unfortunately in the eyes of the demon, it was just a group of ants. Even if she was seriously injured, even if she was trapped in a cage, she still had the ability to slaughter the entire tribe. But it was too boring to just kill them. I was seriously injured and trapped in a dangerous place, and may not be able to recover even after thousands of years, so it was better to use the insignificant power of these ants. So I bred them. Speaking of this, the demon seemed very proud. I learned these breeding skills from you humans by chance, and it is indeed very interesting. It is different from hunting alone in the past. First, I used absolute power to eliminate the strong resistance in the tribe, and then let the weak in the tribe flourish. Every time they accumulated a certain amount of power, I carried out a harvest. And in order to prevent them from completely losing hope and rapidly degenerating, I allowed them to retain the right to delusion, and even took the initiative to enlighten the individuals in the tribe, making them the so-called geniuses whose cultivation speed far surpassed their peers, and then when necessary, I let them taste some sweetness. Unfortunately, even so, their will to resist is too disappointing. After the first few hundred years of fierce resistance, they turned their hope to escape, and were no longer willing to fight with us head-on. With the loss of their fighting spirit, their physical bodies also began to degenerate rapidly, and their value as livestock was not as before. The flesh and blood energy harvested each time also became less and less, and could only be played around as toys. But after playing around for so many years, I'm already tired of it. These words made Ouyang Shang and Wang Lu break out in a cold sweat. This demon was really too awesome. She actually played around with a powerful demon tribe like a toy for 2,000 years, and this was when she was trapped in a cage and seriously injured. Previously, when they observed this demon tribe, they only felt that everything was shocking. Although the ability of the tribe members was weak, and they did not have the strength to truss a chicken, their spirit of resistance was worthy of respect. But it turned out that this spirit of resistance was just the lubricant that this demon put on the toys. From the beginning to the end, this demon tribe had never escaped from the demon's palm. Now was it their turn? The demon tribe had worked hard for 2,000 years, but the result was just a joke. Then if it was Ouyang Shang and Wang Lu, then you must be very bored now? Wang Lu asked. The demon in the cave sighed faintly. Yes, no matter how fun a game is, after playing it for 1,000 years, it will become very boring. That is why I asked, how do you want to be tortured to death by me? If it makes me happy, I can let you die a little faster. Well, first let me ask you a question. From the perspective of gender, you are a female, right? Well, from the perspective of you humans, I should be considered a female, right? If that is so, then it is easy. As Wang Lu spoke, the corners of his mouth hooked up in a creepy smile. I don't know if you have heard of this saying, for all the women in the world, the greatest pleasure is the joy of breastfeeding. Beck? A voice filled with curiosity could be heard. Believe me, as long as you are willing to try, it will be a pleasant experience that you will remember for a lifetime. Before his voice fell, Wang Lu saw the horrified look of Ouyang Shang. This was the first time he saw this big brother of Spirit Sword sect lose his composure like this. Obviously, he also guessed what he was going to do next. And that was far beyond his ability to bear. However, Wang Lu still calmly said what he wanted to say next. And I am willing to help you complete this great entertainment. Chapter 502. The joy of breastfeeding and childcare. And that does sound like fun. Unfortunately, I don't remember who brought me up when I was a child. As he spoke, the voice in the cave seemed distant and ethereal, as if he was trapped in a memory from tens of thousands of years ago. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Ouyang Shang hurriedly transmitted his voice through primordial spirit. Junior brother Wang Lu, are you crazy? Wang Lu replied, otherwise what are you going to do? Apart from this trick, tell me, what else can I do to satisfy her entertainment needs? Teach her to play and level up? But now we are still short of one. At least we have to wait until she gives birth and raises the child, then we can fill the table, right? What the fuck, you still have the mood to talk about this now? Otherwise, I will pee in my pants. While talking tit for tat with Ouyang Shang through primordial spirit, Wang Lu's eyes gradually showed a bit of madness. This is a life and death juncture. In order to survive, any trick can be used. You are either succeed or die. With this kind of opponent, do you still want to drag it out? There's only a sliver of a chance for us. As the two were talking, the voice in the cave sounded again. The joy of breastfeeding does make me a little interested, but unfortunately, you two little guys are still too young to be of any help. Wang Lu heard this and was very anxious. You don't know this. Although my current realm is not high compared to you, I have a big tool. I guarantee you will be satisfied. Don't jump to conclusions if you don't experience it. Ouyang Shang was dumbfounded. Hey, haha. After Wang Lu finished speaking, the demon in the cave suddenly laughed. Little guy, you're getting more and more fun. I can't even bear to kill you. But if you want to get close to me with your current abilities, you must be dreaming. I'm afraid that before you can even get close to me. Strange, why do you have a familiar smell? This doesn't make sense. Then the voice in the cave was silent for a long time. Just as Wang Lu and Ouyang Shang looked at each other, the demon spoke again. Tieske, I don't understand. Come here and let me see what's going on. As soon as he finished speaking, a black shadow suddenly sprang out of the cave and wrapped around Wang Lu like a rope. With a sudden pull he was pulled into the cave. Hello. Ouyang Shang immediately tried to save him, but his speed was still too slow compared to that demon. By the time he stretched out his hand, Wang Lu's figure had already disappeared from the cave. Ouyang Shang did not hesitate and immediately jumped down, but just as he reached the entrance of the cave, he was bounced back by an invisible repulsive force. That force was gentle but firm. Ouyang Shang changed several methods but still couldn't get around it. In a moment of desperation he once again sent out a King Pill Sword Chi trying to break the ground. However, his jade mansion was shaken by the rebounding force. Obviously, that devil had completely blocked the way. Ouyang Shang went silent for a moment, then he fiercely gritted his teeth and shouted loudly. No matter how extraordinary junior brother Wang's natural talent is, he's still young after all, and he alone isn't enough. Let me in, we brothers will serve you together. I bet my dignity as a man that I will definitely serve you to your satisfaction. There was no response at all. Ouyang Shang's feat of betting his dignity as a man didn't seem to arouse the other party's interest. Hey, don't hit me like that, okay? It took me a lot of determination to say those words. To be honest, I'm actually quite popular with the girls in the sect. Even some female spirit beasts have expressed their affection for me. You must not look down on people. At least tell me, why can junior brother Wang do it but I can't? Which part of him is better than me? What he can give, why can't I give? Also, this time without waiting for Ouyang Shang to finish, an impatient voice came from inside the cave. Are you done or not? Then a black shadow rope flew out, directly wrapped around Ouyang Shang's neck, and then pulled him into the cave. Ouyang Shang only felt a blur in front of him, and then he was brought into the cave. The cave was dark and his perception as a cultivator was also suppressed. Therefore he tried to ignite the flame with a spell. The light lit up without any obstruction, and Ouyang Shang saw, not far in front of him, Wang Lu was sitting cross-legged on the ground and then naked. F***CK? Ouyang Shang was so shocked that he almost scattered the samadhi fire on his fingertips. Junior brother Wang Lu Wang Lu was also surprised. Senior brother Ouyang? Why are you here? I didn't know that you have such a strange taste, willing to get involved in this kind of thing. If I don't get involved, do you want to take the responsibility alone? As a senior brother, I'll lose face. Of course, Wang Lu knew that he was worried about him. He sighed slightly and asked, but since both of us are here, what about the others? Ouyang Shang only answered, you are more important than anything. Senior brother, don't tell me that you can't control yourself after seeing my naked body, so you're talking without a care? Don't waste such romantic lines on me, give them to those little junior sisters who have admired you for a long time. What kind of person do you think I am? While the two were arguing, the demon chuckled. Do you two little guys want to rehearse with each other before we do? Wang Lu was stunned. That scene is so beautiful that I don't dare to look at it. By the way, now that I've been honest with you, do you see anything? The demon said, very interesting. As they spoke, the darkness in the cave suddenly became thicker, and the samadhi fire on Ouyang Shang's fingertips seemed to be suppressed by some power, becoming shaky and on the verge of collapse. And with this weak light, they could vaguely see a huge black shadow rolling over like a mountain. Little guy, you have the smell of our people on you? This is very strange. I don't remember that there are still people of our race left on this continent. But the smell is indeed right. No wonder when I first found you two, I didn't have much interest in killing you. Ouyang Shang was stunned. Junior brother Wang Lu has the smell of the demon's people on you? Wang Lu also frowned tightly. When did I come into contact with the demon's people? And from what she said, it seems that her people are all extinct. But I didn't transmigrate back from the past, I transmigrated back from the future. While thinking, Wang Lu smiled and said, since we are so fated then, no way little guy, the smell on you makes me feel close, but I don't want to have sex with you. Wang Lu was instantly shocked. Could it be the smell of a warm man? Then Wang Lu turned his head to look at Ouyang Shang. The latter's expression changed several times, looking rather uncomfortable. Wang Lu was given the good guy card because of his smell, so next, he who didn't have the smell of a good guy was obviously duty-bound. Damn, if I knew this would happen, why did I follow in? Wang Lu wasn't in danger at all, but I put myself in danger. This payment was simply, ha little guy, don't worry, I'm not interested in that matter now. It's just that I've been too bored all this time, so I have to find some fun. Wang Lu and Ouyang Shang looked at each other, feeling lucky in their hearts. It seemed that they had passed this stage. Although it was somewhat inexplicable and they could only pass it by luck, but luck was also a part of strength. This demon seemed to be gentle and easy to talk to since they met, but if they really thought that she was docile, the tens of thousands of martyrs engraved on the outer wall of the temple on the ground would definitely be indignant. Of course, from another perspective, this demon was actually only venting her anger on the other demons because of the strong enemy from 2,000 years ago. Her nature might not be that cruel and heartless. If that was the case, did it mean that the crisis of the destruction of the Golden Generation had been resolved? After Wang Lu crossed over to this world all the way until now, the only thing that could cause the catastrophe in the future was this unfathomable great devil. Then was it because he didn't exist that eldest senior brother Ouyang Shang couldn't find a way to mediate and was killed by this demon? It was just that the counterattack before his death also aggravated her injuries, which made her very angry, so the other junior brothers and sisters were also implicated and killed by her one by one? No, this explanation was too far-fetched and it couldn't explain how the black tide appeared in the future. After all, it was a standard specialty of the demons, and it was impossible for the demons in the desert oasis on the ground to set off the black tide even if they were 10 times more powerful. So what was the truth of the matter? What role did this great demon who was suppressed here play in the incident that year? And besides her, who else could have such a great ability? Wang Lu and Ouyang Shang didn't discuss anything, but their thoughts turned to the same problem at the same time. Both of them were people who thought very quickly and soon they vaguely grasped something. And at this time the great demon said with boredom, "Hey, we're really bored now. It seems that this cage can't be broken in 500 years. How do you think we're going to spend this long time?" As soon as the great demon spoke, the vague inspiration that the two of them grasped disappeared. The two of them were not discouraged. Inspiration was never in short supply for them and they could think about it when they had time. And when Wang Lu heard that the great demon vaguely seemed to be acting like a spoiled child, he was even more amused. He thought to himself, "You really don't treat the two of us as outsiders now? In that case I'll give you a hand. If you're just bored, I have an idea here that you can use for reference. Let's hear it. Try role-playing, treat it as an achievement party." Role-playing? Achievement party? It's to let yourself play a special role, then set up some special challenges and complete the challenges for fun. In fact, you have a good toy in your hand but after playing with it for 2,000 years, it's no longer fresh. Now I'm going to give you a new way to play. The great demon sounded very interested. First of all, with your ability, it's not difficult to gain control of any member of the tribe, right? Yes. Then you try to control a poor loser as the basis for role-playing, and then set up this achievement goal. Find a way to make all the beautiful girls in the tribe pregnant with his child. During this period you can't use your power on a large scale. How about it? Isn't it interesting? How is it interesting? You'll know after you try. Chapter 503. Translator, Ryuxinji Editor. H2DH2 Mr. In the end, Wang Lu was unable to convince the demon to play the role of a real person. Although his creativity had indeed piqued the demon's interest, there was a technical hurdle that he could not overcome. Those bugs, just smelling their scent makes me nauseous. Possessing them and whatnot, our subconscious repulsion would instantly reduce their city to nothingness. Considering the demon's 2,000 years of absolute rule, Wang Lu did not feel that he was bragging, so he could only regretfully offer an alternative. Have you heard of Mahjong? What's that? A very exciting and cool traditional competitive game. With that, Wang Lu opened his mustard seed bag and took out a huge piece of jadeite. His 5 fingers gently touched the jadeite, and the jadeite was neatly cut into hundreds of cubes. Moreover, each cube had a green back and a flawless white front. Then, as Wang Lu's fingers moved gently, various patterns appeared on the front of the cubes. Ouyang Shang was amused. "You're going to teach her Mahjong?" "That's right, and it's a special kind of Mahjong." "What's so special about it?" Wang Lu smiled, then looked up at the demon and said, "Compared to the Mahjong that can be found everywhere in the mortal world, my Mahjong has a unique way of playing. The loser has to take off their clothes." "Wait a minute, how come I've never heard of such a dirty game?" "That's why I say you're good at everything, eldest senior brother. It's just that you lack experience and knowledge." As Wang Lu bickered with the eldest senior brother, he explained the rules of the game to the invisible demon. The demon's primordial spirit was so powerful that she understood the rules of the game in a flash. Games in the mortal world were not very interesting to her, but the biggest charm of competitive games was the battle with the opponent. Although the 2 little guys in front of her were not worth mentioning in terms of strength, they always had new and surprising ideas. "Alright, I'll play with you guys. But about the rules of taking off your clothes." I know what you want, so I can promise you that if you can really beat me, I'll let you see the looks I'm so proud of. Wang Lu's intentions were exposed, but he did not feel awkward. Instead he smiled. Sure, but before the game starts, can you let me put on my clothes first? Before this, the demon had forced Wang Lu to appear naked in order to get a clear whiff of his scent. Wang Lu had been unperturbed, not in a hurry to put on his clothes after running around naked for so long. There was no harm in letting others see what he was proud of anyway. There was no point in holding on to it. What's the point of keeping to himself? Formless Demon was also very concerned about the fairness of the competition. After all, the fun was to make people take off their clothes. If they had no clothes to take off at the beginning, how could they play the game? Although Wang Lu Yunxi, the demon was still the demon's to caricature of the demon. But what she was interested in was to let these two proud little guys taste the taste of failure again and again. But soon she found that she should not be so indulgent to her opponent, because Wang Lu's so-called putting on his clothes was clearly a loophole in the program. After he put on his underwear and Taoist robe, he began to put on more clothes. From a simple Mandarin jacket to a luxurious leather coat, he wrapped dozens of layers inside and out, and among them were many small pieces such as belts, shawls, and so on. Obviously these pieces were small, but they were still counted as one piece. God knows how many things Wang Lu stored in his mustard seed bag. These clothes were clearly not what he usually wore. The clothes that he wore on the outside were at least several times larger than his size, and the style also seemed to be quite out of place. But he had them at his fingertips, and they came in handy at this time. While the invisible demon was stunned, she suddenly heard Ouyang Shang say, "Oh right, there's still this trick to use." Then he also untied the mustard seed bag on his waist and put on the clothes one by one. In a short while, he wrapped himself into a ball. These two disciples of Spirit Sword sect who were separated for more than 100 years actually had an extraordinary tacit understanding in this kind of pain-in-the-ass thing. "Hey you two, don't go too far, I think this game is a bit not fun anymore." Thereupon Wang Lu and Ouyang Shang quickly took off half of their clothes, and then the three of them officially started the game. During the game there was no lightning, thunder, wind, or water. The three of them did not use their magical power, they just relied on the most basic skills and luck to compete. Because if they used their magical power, there was no need to play this game. It was guaranteed that the great demon would win the game. Not to mention that Wang Lu and Ouyang Shang would not be able to find any decent tiles. It was very likely that they would find a row of plum blossoms, orchids, bamboo, and chrysanthemums. And when it came to basic skills, Wang Lu and Ouyang Shang actually had no advantage. No matter how talented they were, it was impossible for them to delve into every trivial matter. Not to mention, among the entertainment items, Mahjong was just a trivial matter, a mortal's game, which was not worth the time to delve into. What they possessed was nothing more than the ability to calculate and plan that far surpassed the mortals. But when it came to calculating and planning, who could compare with this great demon who had played the demon race in the palm of her hand for 2,000 years? Even if the latter was just a beginner, her skill was still above the two disciples of Spirit Sword sect. Then what they were competing for was luck. The so-called luck was invisible and unpredictable. For many people in the mortal world it was something that they believed in, but if they did not believe in, it was not. Even if some people were famous for their amazing luck, they did not dare to say that they would be able to rely on luck. However, for the cultivators of the immortal path, mastering the law of change of heaven and earth was the ability to eat. And this two words, luck, was a reflection of the law of change of heaven and earth. Therefore, cultivators naturally had a different understanding of it. Luck was real. Between people, the difference between good luck and bad luck was also real. Of course, this did not lead to an absolute result. For example, no matter how lucky a person was, it was impossible to throw a coin 100 times in a row. However, lucky people were often able to turn the coin in their favor at the critical moment. The three people present were undoubtedly people with good luck. Without good luck, it was impossible for Ouyang Shang to have the heavenly spirit root and enter the Spirit Sword sect. And Wang Lu's luck was even more needless to say. However, the great demon's luck was also not simple. In the world, except for a few kinds of ancient creatures, there was no one who was born powerful. If one wanted to have the ability to penetrate the heaven and earth, one must diligently practice hard, coupled with enough good luck. With the strength of this great demon, she must be extremely lucky to be able to grow to the point where she was today. According to the general standard, her luck must be much better than that of Wang Lu and Ouyang Shang. After all, the world was so big that there were countless king pill-level geniuses. However, the great demon-level powerhouses were not common. The great demon knew that the two little guys relied on luck to win, but she also firmly believed that these two little guys were overconfident. In terms of luck, at least she would not lose to them. Although she was seriously injured by a sneak attack and suppressed here for 2,000 years, which seemed to be bad luck, she did not waste these 2,000 years. On the contrary, the life of imprisonment made her realize more things. Once she was free, she might be able to break through the bottleneck that she thought she would never be able to break through. Compared to the breakthrough in strength, a mere 2,000 years of imprisonment was simply too cheap. Not to mention that in these 2,000 years, her life was actually very comfortable. Both sides had great confidence. The great demon guessed that she only needed half a day to make the two little guys naked, which made her feel ashamed. After half a day, the result was indeed settled. The great demon looked at the neatly arranged row of jade cards in front of her in disbelief. The messy arrangement made her completely lose interest in continuing the game from the beginning. But the two little guys in front of her showed a smile after arranging the cards. This damn smile. In the previous half-day of competition, every time they showed such a smile, it meant that they were not far from victory. In fact, they did win many times. Out of 10 times, they won at least 8 times, and each time they won by a large margin. It had nothing to do with any magic or card skills, and it was not cheating. In front of her, no one could cheat. It was pure and absolute luck. In short, these two young people's luck was so strong that it even suppressed the strength of the great demon who was at the top of the world. And this was impossible. Just as she was thinking, it was Wang Lu's turn to draw a card. As a result, he directly won the first card and won by a large margin. Forget it, I don't want to play anymore. The great demon finally lost interest in the game. In fact, she was not interested in mahjong from the beginning. She was only interested in winning the two little guys. Now that she couldn't win, there was no need to play anymore. It's really strange. You two little guys are actually not that great. In the previous 9 regions, it was not uncommon for the king pill to be at the same level as you two. How can you be so lucky? With such good luck, please become a little stronger so that we can be mentally prepared. Wang Lu was stunned. What you mean by before? Is it before the age of chaos? I don't know what the age of chaos is. I can't remember the last time I came to 9 regions. If it weren't for someone plotting against me, I'm afraid I would never come here again. Forget it, since I'm willing to bet, I'll let you see my true face. After that, the darkness in the cave receded. Wang Lu and Ouyang Shang only felt that their eyes suddenly opened up. The rock walls around the cave also became clear, and then, there was a corner that was still dark and deep. But that was no longer the darkness that the great demon used to hide her figure, but the great demon's body. First of all, it was a black fur that faintly glowed under the light of the fire. Looking up along the luster, 2 star-like eyes shone brightly. And then they really saw her outline. It was a mountain-sized wolf with elegant curves and a pitch-black body. Although it was not a human, it had the beauty that all living things could feel. Perhaps ordinary people couldn't feel it clearly, but the more powerful they were, the more they could feel the power of this shocking beauty. The great demon didn't boast. This was indeed a beauty that was worth being proud of. Ouyang Shang's eyes were slightly blurred, deeply shocked by the beauty of this pure black creature. Wang Lu was even more surprised. He took a few steps back and almost fell to the ground. Because he had seen similar creatures, but they were far less huge and shocking. Even their temperament was poles apart. But he was sure that they must be from the same origin. Western Mountain Black Tide, Mixed Fur Native Dog. Fenrir? You're the Western Continent Demon Wolf Fenrir? Hey, you actually recognize me? Chapter 504. Encountering an old friend in a foreign land should be a happy thing, especially when the opponent, who was on full alert and on edge, found out that it was the mother of his friend, which made him feel even more relieved. However, in a flash, Wang Lu felt as if he had fallen into an ice cave, because he had realized that he had made a mistake again. The one who caused the destruction of the Golden Generation was not the invisible devil that the desert demons had feared for 2,000 years, but someone else. The reason was very simple. If the disaster was caused by this monster wolf, then when Wang Lu picked up Quan Zhuhua from the Black Tide in the Western Mountain, there was no reason for Wang Wu not to recognize its breed. That was the descendant of the murderer that she hated for life. Wang Wu did not recognize it, and even the other people on Spirit Sword Mountain did not recognize it. In the end, it was Aya who revealed the secret. This could only mean that in the immortal cultivation of the cultivators of Spirit Sword Mountain, Western Continent monster wolf Fenrir did not occupy any important position. At least, it was impossible for it to be the culprit that caused all the disasters. Then, who was the real murderer? Since his time traveling until now, Wang Lu had experienced too many failed expectations, and along the way he had gone in the wrong direction too many times. Therefore he didn't mind being wrong again. In any case, wasn't success the fruit that could only be tasted after repeated failures? Moreover, each failure could bring out new clues, so it was not worthless. However, this time the clue brought out by guessing the wrong target was chilling. If the real murderer was not the demon wolf Fenrir. Considering Quan Zouhua's survival in the Black Tide 100 years later, it meant that she, as a mother, was likely to have died in the disaster, or even died silently. But with her strength, who could kill her in the present age? There was only one possibility. Wang Lu bowed his head in contemplation and then said, "Excuse me? You said that the opponent who attacked you 2,000 years ago is now suppressed by you? In other words, he is not dead?" Fenrir was obviously not interested in this topic. Her voice was somewhat indifferent. "Humph, sooner or later I will kill him. In other words, he is not dead?" Fenrir glanced at him and did not speak again. She raised her head high to show her disdain. Obviously, she was extremely dissatisfied with Wang Lu's reaction. It was rare for him to reveal his true appearance. In the past 2,000 years, these two little fellows were the only ones who were fortunate enough to see this flawless body. This was an honor that they could die with no regrets. The one beside him had a good reaction. He was already deeply immersed in it and could not extricate himself. Obviously, he knew how to appreciate beauty. But the other one was obviously not enlightened. At this time, instead of kneeling down and worshipping the goddess of beauty, why did he care about that bitch from 2,000 years ago? Could it be that he felt that he couldn't suppress a sneak attacker with his own strength? Although she had indeed used 2,000 years and was still unable to destroy him, that was only because she was trapped in a cage. Once she broke free, she could immediately destroy his soul. Not to mention that the ordeal this time had caused her to gradually be reborn and reach a higher level. And even if he was worried that there were hidden dangers, why was he not even raising his head? Did he really think that he could do whatever he wanted just because he was doted on? Tiske, these human little fellows have always been like this. With just a little bit of color, they don't know the immensity of heaven and earth. After thinking about it, she was very dissatisfied with Wang Lu. Her original good impression of him quickly disappeared, because she felt that she was being used. The little guy did not care about her situation, only cared about the resources that she might have in her hands. She hated this kind of little thing the most. Wang Lu was going to ask for more details, but when he saw Fenrir's angry face and the black shadow gradually shrouding him, he suddenly realized that now was not a good time to ask questions. At the same time, now was not a good time to apologize immediately, because once he apologized, it meant that he admitted his mistake. For this Western continent monster wolf, a toy that made mistakes was no longer qualified to be a toy. Therefore Wang Lu had to find a way to arouse her interest, such as. He slightly turned his head, making his eyes more away from the monster wolf, and then circulated his power to his face, making his cheeks blush. The words that came out of his mouth became incoherent. "I think you still have to be careful. After all, as the saying goes, it's better to be safe than sorry. It's not easy for you to cultivate to this point. Moreover, in addition to being strong enough, you are also so. Monster wolf Fenrir became impatient. What the hell is this? She even had the murderous intention in her heart. Then at this time she suddenly found that Wang Lu's reaction seemed a bit strange. His eyes wandered left and right, refusing to stop on her body, as if there was something unsightly on her body. Thus Fenrir snapped, "Mortal, look at me." Upon hearing this, Wang Lu's whole body was shocked. He felt that the 206 non-phase sword bones were faintly numbed by this shout. Then he somewhat reluctantly raised his head and looked straight into the monster wolf's eyes, which seemed very reluctant. This made Fenrir even more annoyed. "Mortal, is my figure not worthy of your eyes? No, the main thing is, you're not wearing clothes." "What did you say?" Wang Lu tried to make his face redder. "Don't look at indecent things." The words "don't look at indecent things" made the monster wolf Fenrir unable to react for a long time. Wang Lu took this opportunity to turn his head and then explained, "It's because your figure is too beautiful that I'm afraid that if I look at it for too long, I won't be able to hold it. Of course, if you don't mind me not being able to hold it, the happiness of raising a child that I said before still counts." Fenrir felt that her brain seemed to be unable to wrap around it. After a moment she asked with interest, "For you humans, my appearance can actually make you interested in that aspect?" Wang Lu confidently said, "Beauty is not divided by gender, sexiness is not divided by race. I have always been a man of universal love." With that, Wang Lu inwardly remembered the mother and daughter who were neither human nor beast on the Grand Cloud Mountain. To say universal love was really not a lie. Especially for dogs, he simply had an indissoluble bond. Well, you pass, little guy. With that, the monster wolf Fenrir smiled. She once again felt a new pleasure, so her voice also returned to its previous relaxed tone. Next, say what you wanted to say before. What do you think about my old rival? I'm worried that your old rival is still restless because your experience is too similar to his. Both of you were sneak attacked and suppressed, falling into a deep predicament. After 2,000 years, you have found a way to break through. I'm worried that he will also find it. The monster wolf Fenrir laughed and said, You're worried that he can break free? Ha, for 2,000 years I have been personally suppressing him. His every move can't escape my perception. I'm not worried that he will make a comeback, but you, a new little guy, are worried? Wang Lu paused and then confidently said, Rationally, I know that this is a groundless fear, but I can't help but worry about you. Before I see that guy has no hope of making a comeback, I can't be at ease. In the long life of the monster wolf Fenrir, she had never seen such a maverick little guy. Although she knew that he was mostly saying flowery words at this time, but these flowery words didn't seem to be annoying. Perhaps it was because of the amiable smell of Wang Lu, or perhaps it was because she was really bored for too long in the past 2,000 years, so she finally decided to meet Wang Lu's request. Since you are so worried. The monster wolf Fenrir shook her head. Well, I'll let you see the miserable situation of that guy now so that you can really feel at ease. After that, Fenrir's front paw slammed on the ground. Suddenly, the ground cracked and a bottomless pit appeared on the ground. Wang Lu and Ouyang Shang couldn't help but curiously look at it. The deep darkness in the pit made people feel awe, as if it led to an unknown space. Fenrir explained, This is his cage. Now he is suppressed in the 9th level of the abyss. It is an absolute nothingness. As long as little guys like you are thrown in, you will be melted by the nothingness in the time it takes to drink a cup of tea. He can only struggle at death's door. For 2,000 years he has not received a trace of energy supplement, and he has to constantly consume his own energy to survive. He will only get weaker and weaker. If he couldn't come out 2,000 years ago, there is no hope now. Wang Lu looked at the endless abyss in the pit and asked, Absolute nothingness? This is very safe. Listening to Fenrir's explanation, Wang Lu was even more confused. Could it be that this line was also broken? Absolute nothingness. For the vast majority of creatures, it was a land of death. Only a Yuanying stage Taoist master could maintain his body in the nothingness. Therefore, if Fenrir really locked him in the absolute nothingness, then there was indeed no possibility for him to escape. But vaguely Wang Lu always felt that things were not so absolute. Unfortunately, with only insignificant clues, he could only think of this for a while, and it was difficult for him to continue thinking. Well, you have seen the 9th abyss, you should be relieved, right? Wang Lu smiled and said, Worthy of being the famous world destroyer demonic wolf, I have nothing to worry about. It would be strange if he didn't worry. If the real murderer of 100 years ago was really the old enemy of the demonic wolf, things would be easier to deal with because at least he could lock the target range and then he could be on full alert. But now, all the clues were cut off and he could only start over again. So after a moment of silence, Wang Lu changed the topic and asked, In this savage land, is there any powerful existence that is particularly worth paying attention to? Nothing. The demonic wolf Fenrir replied decisively, This land is indeed magical, but it has not given birth to two powerful individuals. So you don't have to worry about any external threats. In the first few hundred years, there were indeed some ignorant things that wanted to take advantage of me when I was seriously injured, but they all became nourishment for me. Now, I hope that there is really a particularly powerful existence in this savage land. In that case, I might be able to get out of here in a few years. Wang Lu felt even more helpless after listening to it. This was not right, that was not right. What the hell was the real murderer of 100 years ago? Why was this reasoning so difficult? Just as he was fretting, he suddenly heard Fenrir say with some boredom, This guy is also strange. After being trapped in the 9th abyss, he has not moved for 100 years, but he is not dead. He seems to be sleeping leisurely. I don't know what he is dreaming about. Wait, dream? Chapter 505. When it came to the dream, Wang Lu could not help but think of the most magnificent dream he had ever seen in his life, the new demon world that carried the last wishes of hundreds of millions of creatures, as well as the towering mountain of corpses that went straight into the sky, the winding secret room in the middle of the mountain of corpses, and the missing person in the secret room. If it was him, then all the clues could be connected. No, it should be inferred from the time point that it could only be him. The new demon world was born 2,000 years ago. At that time, the demon king who was supposed to guard the mountain of corpses quietly slipped away. And Fenrir was attacked and seriously injured by a powerful enemy, and then suppressed here. It was also 2,000 years ago, so how could people not associate it with the same thing? The last king of the demon world abandoned his people and led a new tribe to 9 regions. They went to the western continent to hunt the demonic wolf Fenrir, trying to transform its power for his own use. However, in the end he was bitten back by the demonic wolf, and the tribe became the toy of the demonic wolf. Such an ending could be said to be self-inflicted. But similarly, if it was really him, Fenrir's 9th deep prison would not be so safe. Because the dream-building technique that the last king was best at was precisely to create something out of nothing, to produce power from nothingness. The only problem was that the amount of power needed to construct the dreamland was extremely huge. He was sneak attacked by the demon wolf Fenrir and fell into the 9th level of the abyss. In a hurry, what scale of dreamland could he construct by himself? However, no matter how weak the dream was, if it was allowed to develop and multiply for 2,000 years, once it started to snowball, it would not be surprising for it to eventually form any result. For example, 150 years later, the endless black tide that would cover the entire savage land. Thinking of this, Wang Lu felt that this matter should not be delayed. Hearing that Fenrir was recalling the past, he interrupted. That powerful enemy is not tall, has delicate features and looks like a young man? Before his voice fell, the cave was suddenly shrouded in darkness. Fenrir's body suddenly stood up, and an irresistible and astonishing pressure came. How do you know? In the darkness, Fenrir's voice was no longer as relaxed as before. That unique female voice became heavy and hoarse, like the roar of a beast. Fenrir had been easy to talk to before because Wang Lu and Ouyang Shang had coaxed her to be happy, but if these 2 little guys had anything to do with that powerful enemy, Fenrir would no longer be happy. I never told you what he looked like. Wang Lu operated his non-phase method, forcibly gathered his almost scattered primordial spirit, and then said with a sinking voice, 2,000 years ago, there was a great turmoil in the demon world. Fenrir didn't mind that Wang Lu had diverted the topic a bit too far. Instead, she nodded silently. Continue? That turmoil almost destroyed the demon world. At that time, the demon king led the survivors to create an amazing miracle to continue the demon civilization. That miracle was called the new demon world. With that said, Wang Lu stretched out his hand and pointed in front of him. Suddenly, colorful lights appeared in the darkness, transforming into various scenes of the new demon world. Although it was only a spell, and Wang Lu didn't put his heart into it, causing the image to be blurred, Fenrir still felt the infinite vitality contained in the new demon world. Continue. Wang Lu nodded and began to change the image. The perspective continued to leap upward until it broke through the blue dome of heaven, picked out the shackles of the new demon world, and saw the truth of everything. Wang Lu presented the mountain of corpses of hundreds of millions of creatures in front of Fenrir. The western continent's world destroyer demonic wolf had long been accustomed to destruction and death, but seeing this amazing mountain, it still felt frightened. What is this? The carrier of the new demon world, the origin of everything. Wang Lu said and continued to move the perspective. From the corner of the mountain of corpses, he went deep into the mountain to explore the secret inside. Fenrir saw a long and narrow corridor as well as the square secret room behind the corridor, the empty coffin in the middle of the secret room, and the surrounding walls that recorded the dream-building technique. Seeing these, she also understood the truth of everything. Wolves had always been cunning and swift creatures, and the western continent's world destroyer demonic wolf was even more so. She might be capricious and playful, but she would never be slow and stupid. I have one last question. How do you know all this? Wang Lu responded indifferently. The sect's elder was lucky enough to discover this secret and then passed it on to us, the elite disciples. Fenrir closed her eyes and accepted this answer for the time being, which was indeed the most reasonable answer. Wang Lu didn't reveal the truth that he was a time traveler. Although that was the easiest way to win people's trust, he still couldn't believe this western continent's world destroyer demonic wolf. He was honest with Ouyang Shang because he trusted the other party. He knew that the two sides had the same interests and would only try to play the advantage of being a time traveler together to reverse history and save the golden generation of Spirit Sword sect. However, for Fenrir, the use of being a time traveler was obviously more than that. In order to avoid trouble, Wang Lu pushed everything to the groundless elder of the sect. Fortunately, Fenrir seemed to be preoccupied and didn't care about it seriously. Now that Fenrir knew the truth, the next step was to find a way to completely eliminate the Demon King in the ninth depth prison. For this point, Wang Lu currently had some ideas to try. However, before he opened his mouth, he heard Fenrir's slightly tired voice. "Okay, I already know you can go now." As soon as her voice fell, Wang Lu and Ouyang Shang felt their vision blurred, and then they were sent out of the underground cave and directly came to the outside of the temple on the ground. She actually asked us to leave? Wang Lu was inexplicably surprised. Probably because she doesn't trust us. Ouyang Shang speculated, next she's going to deal with the powerful enemy in the ninth depth prison. She may have to use some forbidden secret method, during which her body will become particularly fragile, so she doesn't want us to be around. This explanation was reasonable and Wang Lu had nothing to say. After a while Wang Lu sighed again. In the end the child-raising plan was not successfully implemented. If the two sides had the fate of merging, they probably wouldn't be so wary of each other at this time. Ouyang Shang wanted to nod and say yes, but he thought that the reason why the child-raising plan was not successful was largely because after Wang Lu was issued a close relative card, he, as a substitute, did not keep up in time. So he didn't comment on it so as not to get himself into trouble. So he cleared his throat and changed the topic. At present we probably can't go to the underground cave, we can't watch from the outside. About that dream building technique I have some ideas. Wang Lu smiled and said, I happen to have one too. Although the dream building technique is created from nothing, to break the ninth depth prison, the energy required is extremely huge. And this requires a suitable carrier. But he is a person who can't even protect himself. Ouyang Shang said, most likely there is help from the outside, but from the situation of the tribe, it seems that even the great elder has forgotten what happened 2,000 years ago. Wang Lu said, it's not surprising that civilization is broken. And to accumulate power by the dream-building technique, this is obviously the biggest secret he needs to hide for 2,000 years. There are many people in the tribe and it's easy to leak the secret, so it's better not to let them know, and simply use their power. So, the next step is to inquire about the dream world in the tribe. Maybe we will find something. The two seemed to be talking to each other, but in fact they were talking to themselves as they arranged the next step of the action. Then they agreed to act separately and inquire about the secret of the dream in the tribe. Then the two of them went to the tribe's great elder at the same time. When they met at the entrance of the great elder's tent, both of them smiled. To inquire about the legend of the tribe, of course the most straightforward way was to find the tribe leader. The two lifted the curtain together. In the middle of the tent, the great elder was enjoying his lunch. Seeing the two come in, he couldn't help but raise his head in surprise. You? Wang Lu went straight to the point. Elder, may I ask if there are any legends about dreams in this tribe? Ouyang Shang added, or, over the years, have there been people in the tribe who have had bizarre dreams? As for the content, it's probably related to resisting the invisible demon. Hearing the two ask this, the surprise on the great elder's face deepened. He put down his bowl. You two, why do you suddenly want to inquire about this? Wang Lu and Ouyang Shang didn't speak, but carefully observed the reaction of the great elder. The great elder didn't seem to have any abnormalities, and his reaction was what a person who had been asked an inexplicable question should have. But, with this old fellow's shrewdness, it was unrealistic to expect him to reveal a flaw in a few words. But Wang Lu and Ouyang Shang didn't have much time to waste on scheming with the old fellow, so the two of them used a quick and decisive tactic. It was the invisible demon who asked us to ask, Wang Lu said. She wanted us to find out the secret of your tribe's rebellion against her. What? The great elder finally revealed a look of horror. It was real, not the slightest bit fake surprise, fear, and a panic that was trying to hide something. Good, you finally revealed yourself. After seeing the subtle changes in the great elder's expression, Ouyang Shang smiled and stepped forward. His figure flashed and swayed in front of the other, his hand reaching out and grabbing his neck. Sure enough, you're hiding a secret. On the other side, Wang Lu raised his hand, using magic to cover up the sound in the tent, and then similarly moved forward. Tell me in detail about the secret of the dream. Saying that, he also put his hand on the great elder's head. If you don't want to say it yourself, we can only go and see for ourselves. What Wang Lu said was the soul-searching technique commonly used by evil cultivators, which directly searched a person's soul and seized their memory. It was very cruel. Usually it was listed as one of the absolute taboos by righteous cultivators, but it was obvious that whether it was Wang Lu or Ouyang Shang, they both belonged to the type of people who had no taboos. The great elder intended to be stubborn to the end, but just as he thought about it, he saw a green light appear on the hands of the two. It was the sign of the soul-searching technique being used. Both Wang Lu and Ouyang Shang had learned the soul-searching technique. The fear of having his soul searched occupied the great elder's mind in an instant. Although his cultivation was extremely high, his strength was completely incomparable to the two of them. In the face of the naked threat of the two of them, he couldn't resist. Okay, I'll say. Chapter 506. Generally speaking, Wang Lu and Ouyang Shang were both decent people who knew etiquette. Even if they occasionally showed their moral integrity, there was always a bottom line in their means. Otherwise, it would be difficult for the two of them to bear the title of the head of the sect. However, it was precisely because the two of them shouldered the heavy responsibility of the sect that when they needed to use unscrupulous means, they would never hesitate. The great elder of the desert tribe had no enmity with the two of them, and there was nothing wrong with his character. The two of them had no reason to hurt him, which, no matter how one looked at it, was the behavior of evil people. However, at this time what Wang Lu and Ouyang Shang were facing was a matter of life and death for the entire Spirit Sword Mountain. To be evil or to be dead, this choice was not difficult at all. Under the deterrence of the two spells, the great elder did not persist for long before he divulged the tribe's secret. It was not that his will was not strong enough. Naturally, he was afraid of the soul-sucking technique. But more importantly, he could see that the two human cultivators were really willing to shed all pretense of cordiality to learn the secret. They had no scruples in their actions. If he did not let them go until he died, they were likely to turn to the rest of the tribe. At that time, this great tribe that had been in trouble for 2,000 years would be destroyed. Therefore he had no choice at all. There was indeed a legend about a dream in the desert tribe. In the legend, every warrior who dies fighting against the invisible devil will enter the demon spirit dream after death. Demon spirit dream? I don't know what it is. For me, the demon spirit dream is just a legend that has been passed down in the tribe for many, many years. So far, no one has seen it and no one knows what the demon spirit dream is. However, this legend is passed down from generation to generation of great elders. It is a precious secret, so there must be some meaning behind it. I think it should contain the secret that can defeat the invisible devil. Very good. With that, a green light flashed in Wang Lu's hand, and the great elder of the demon race fainted to the ground without saying a word. Wang Lu did not destroy his soul, but turned the soul-searching technique into the soul-stunning thorn and directly stunned him. I think I've guessed the answer. On the other side, Ouyang Shang also touched his chin. He just said that the dead warrior will enter the demon spirit dream? This setting is quite interesting. There are two explanations. First, this is a religious doctrine with no practical meaning. Its purpose is to guide the tribe members to fight bravely and face death with equanimity. However, the legend did not describe the content of the demon spirit dream in detail, and its ability to guide the tribe members was limited. Furthermore, for a tribe that is on the verge of extinction, underestimating the threat of death too much is courting destruction. Ouyang Shang nodded. And the second possibility is the dream-building technique. It should be the second one, said Wang Lu. I really underestimated the last king who personally guided hundreds of millions of creatures to build the new demon realm. I can't believe that he actually dared to plot against the dead. That's right, his power alone is limited. The tribe has fallen into the hands of Fenrir, and the scale can never be expanded to the point where it can support a powerful dream. Even when the tribe was at its strongest, there were no more than 10,000 people. But if we count all the people who died in the past 2,000 years, why didn't I think of this before? Ouyang Shang smiled and said, according to the dream-building technique that you obtained in the secret chamber of the Mountain of Corpses, there is no way to use completely dead people to build a dream. This is a miracle caused by technological innovation, and it can't be helped even if it exceeds the calculation. Then the question now is, what is the true appearance of the demon spirit dream? Junior Brother Wang, about the dream-building technique. I haven't studied it in depth, but I think it's enough to sharpen a spear at the last minute. We don't need to build a dream as long as we can participate in it and watch from the sidelines. As Wang Lu spoke, he unfolded the scroll rubbed in the secret chamber of the Mountain of Corpses. Countless complex patterns floated on the scroll along with the movement of Wang Lu's fingers. The secrets of the dream-building technique were presented in front of them bit by bit. Wang Lu kept moving his fingers to change the images and said, I remember I have seen a similar skill before which can peep into private dreams. It is called endoscopy, right? Endoscopy. Are you sure it is used to peep into dreams? That's it. As Wang Lu spoke, he reached out and touched the scroll, and the rapidly changing images suddenly stopped. It can perceive the existence of dreams, which is suitable for the current situation. Although the legend of the demon spirit dream was known, no one in the desert tribe had actually seen its existence for 2,000 years. Obviously, the last demon king had hidden the dream. If one didn't have the corresponding skills, they wouldn't even be able to see it. Fenrir suppressed the demon king for 2,000 years, but she didn't know the existence of the dream. It was obviously related to this unique skill. The dream-building technique was a rare secret in the demon realm. If Wang Lu didn't happen to explore the demon realm and had a scroll that recorded the dream-building technique, he would be helpless at this time. The skill of perceiving the dream was not complicated. With the ability of Taoist King Pill, it didn't take long for them to completely master the technique and release it on the spot without hesitation. Both of them had a strong sense of crisis. They didn't want to waste even a second, even if there were still many problems that needed to be dealt with. For example, what if the attack on the Great Elder was discovered? They didn't inform Feng Yin and the others at all. What would their reaction be? But now they could only let it go. Even if things developed in the worst direction, it was worth it as long as they could stop the resurrection of the Demon King. After a while, as the spell took effect, the two only felt a slight heat in front of them, and a new world appeared in front of them. The dream created by the dream-building technique didn't have a fixed location. Where the heart was, the dream was. When they realized the existence of the dream and observed it in the right way, they could see the dream built by their predecessors. The surrounding scenery gradually dimmed and became transparent. The light of the new world replaced everything. A vast and boundless battlefield appeared in front of them. At one end of the battlefield, countless demon warriors were like a red tide. They were holding excellent weapons and shouting loudly. Their momentum was like a rainbow and their voice shook the sky. These warriors had the complete posture that the desert tribes yearned for. Each of them was exactly the same as the royal family that ruled the demon world 2,000 years ago. They were wearing heavy armor and were full of fighting spirit. An army composed of tens of thousands of royal warriors had once been invincible in the demon world. According to the history of the demon world, the first demon king unified the demon world with such a powerful army. Even the proud warriors of the Flaming Valley had to express fear of such power. In the eyes of Wang Lu and Ouyang Shang, perhaps due to the limitations of their origin, the incarnation of the demon spirits of these desert tribes couldn't completely replicate the posture of their ancestors. Their average level was still a lot lower. Most of the warriors were only equivalent to human cultivators in the Qi cultivating stage. Only 1/10 of them were in the foundation establishment stage, and there were only a few who were in the King Pill stage of the Shudan stage. However, the advantage in numbers made this army also not to be underestimated. There were at least hundreds of thousands of demons all over the mountains and plains, and hundreds of thousands of Qi cultivating stage cultivators. Even the 5 uniques of the Wanxian League would have to think twice in the face of such a force. However, on this battlefield, the demon race was suppressed to a disadvantage. Because their opponent was too powerful. It was a behemoth that occupied more than half of the battlefield, a thick darkness that couldn't be dispersed. Wherever the darkness passed, everything was annihilated, and even the blue sky was swallowed by it. The demon warriors used the weapons in their hands and their natural magical abilities to constantly condense power to attack the darkness, or ignite flames, call thunder, or throw blazing spears. Among them, a few with higher cultivation could integrate the power of tens of thousands of demon warriors, refine them into huge puppets, or launch amazing witchcraft. However, none of this could reverse the situation. The darkness was steadily expanding, and the devil army was losing ground again and again. Even the most elite soldiers would turn into miserable white bones in an instant if they were touched by the darkness, and then they would vanish in a puff of smoke, leaving nothing behind. Wang Lu and Ouyang Shang watched from a corner of the battlefield for a while and saw that at least tens of thousands of warriors had died tragically. This rhythm is a bit strange. If they continue to fight like this, in less than half a day the demons that are all over the mountains and plains will all die. How could they last for the past 2,000 years? Is it too coincidental that the two sides are fighting to the death, or? As Wang Lu spoke, he saw that on the side of the battlefield that belonged to the demon race, the sky suddenly opened, and countless demon warriors descended from the sky to join the battlefield. The addition of fresh troops finally stopped the decline of the demon race, and they began to slowly push forward. During this period, Wang Lu clearly saw that this batch of fresh troops was clearly those who had died before. What kind of technology is this so powerful? If it was just an ordinary dream, let alone resurrection. No matter how bizarre it wouldn't be worth making a fuss about. However, this demon spirit dream was clearly built on a complete and self-consistent rule system, and the scene of resurrection in front of them, what rules could explain it? The same question existed in Ouyang Shang's mind. However, before the two of them could come up with any ideas, they suddenly saw that in the distance, a high-level demon about to shoot on stage was hit by an invisible giant force and fell from the sky like a meteorite, landing right at their feet, creating a huge pit. The demon was also tenacious. He spat out a mouthful of blood in the pit and struggled to stand up, completely disregarding the fact that this would only aggravate his injury. After he got up, he saw Wang Lu and Ouyang Shang and was taken aback. "You are new here?" Wang Lu froze for a moment. "Yes, this is?" The demon laughed upon hearing this. "Haha, you should have guessed that this is the demon spirit dream." Before he finished speaking, he began to vomit blood. No matter how hard he tried, he couldn't stop it, and after a moment he died of exhaustion. Wang Lu and Ouyang Shang looked at each other, feeling that this episode was really a bit inexplicable, but after the time it takes for half an incense stick to burn, they saw another person flying over from the horizon, waving his hand to greet them. It was the one who had just died. Wang Lu looked down and saw that the body of that person was still on the ground. "Haha, are you surprised that I am still alive?" Very simple, because this is the demon spirit dream. A place where the demon race lives forever. Chapter 507. Demon Spirit Dream. Demons live forever. The scene in front of him, coupled with the introduction of this inexplicably enthusiastic high-grade demon, allowed Wang Lu to quickly understand the rules of this dream. It was indeed very simple. There was only one so-called rule. In this space, the demons would never die. No matter what method was used, the demons could not be completely eliminated. Every time death came, it meant the beginning of a new life. According to Wang Lu's understanding of the dream-building technique, this kind of heaven-defying rule was almost impossible to enforce, but in fact, this rule had been faithfully enforced for 2,000 years. What he saw in front of him was the demon spirit warriors that had been gathered in the demon spirit dream for 2,000 years, the total number of which was more than 1,000,000. Judging from the fertility rate of the desert tribes, the population born in 2,000 years was actually more than 1,000,000, but the demon spirit dream would only accept warriors who died fighting against the invisible demons. It was not open to ordinary demons. Not many of these 1,000,000 demon warriors came from the desert tribes, and most of them were recruits that had been bred in the demon spirit dream. And now, the desert tribes that only had a little more than 1,000 people left were even more insignificant to the demon spirit dream. However, it's still very happy to see new faces. It's just that you have all degenerated to the point where you are almost the same as humans. The high-ranking devil sighed in a low voice. "I came here 1,100 years ago. At that time, the scale of the demon spirit dream was not as large as it is now, and every newcomer was a precious resource. Because those who can persist in fighting against the invisible demons to the end are the best warriors in the tribe, they can quickly recover in the demon spirit dream and become reliable comrades. Unfortunately, since I came here, the new recruits are getting weaker and fewer. It can be seen that the situation outside is getting more and more difficult. Sigh, there is not much time left for us." The demon just sighed, and in the blink of an eye, there was another expression. "But you two newcomers don't have to worry too much on this land. You will soon restore the posture that the demons should have. Before, you were just squeezed too hard by the harsh environment. Don't worry, us seniors will take good care of you until you become qualified warriors." As soon as he finished speaking, he saw a series of different colored fireballs flying in the distance, coming menacingly. The high-grade devilish being's expression changed drastically upon seeing this. "Get out of here. We've been targeted." Wang Lu and Ouyang Shang didn't hesitate and immediately cast a spell to escape with the high-ranking devil. A moment later, the place where they had been standing was engulfed in a sea of flames. When the heterochromatic fireball hit the ground, it triggered an earth-shattering explosion. The earth was torn apart and lava spurted out. The scorching airwaves made even Reverend King Pill, who was several kilometers away, feel a wave of disgust. That big guy will occasionally take the initiative to attack, and every time it does, it's like an apocalypse. If you're hit, it'll take a long time to revive. It's not worth it. Seeing as the high-grade devilish lord was about to broach the subject, Wang Lu hurriedly cut him off before asking an important question. "Who's that big guy? Why do you have to fight it endlessly?" The high-tier devilish being stared at Wang Lu with incredulity in his eyes. "You two don't even remember how you got here?" That big fellow is, of course, the formless demon, the greatest enemy of our demon race. As long as it hasn't been destroyed, the war will never stop. Wang Lu turned to look at the darkness that occupied half of the world. Is that the true form of the formless demon? Do you really think that overwhelming numbers is going to work against that thing? Of course it's going to work. It may seem invincible now, but you have to know that over 99% of this world was occupied by darkness 2,000 years ago. Now we can already fight it as an equal. At this rate, as long as we can hold on for another 500 years at most, we'll be able to completely dominate and destroy the formless demon. Regardless of whether your opponent will just sit idly by and let you continue to grow. Even if you win in the demon spirit dream, will you really be able to affect your opponent? Of course we can. As long as we can win here, the formless demon will be destroyed. The high-grade devilish lord didn't elaborate on the reason, but it appeared that he had no doubt about this. Thus, Wang Lu didn't dwell on this question any longer. Instead, he asked, "But what day is it today? Why is there such a large-scale battle?" "Nothing special, we've always fought like this." "Always?" Wang Lu was surprised. "You've been fighting it like this for 2,000 years? "That's right." The high-tier devilish lord replied proudly. "For the past 2,000 years, the war has never stopped. So, all of you? Keep fighting and keep coming back from the dead? Apart from fighting? Is there no other activity?" The high-tier devilish lord was perplexed. "What other activity? Before we kill the formless demon, we don't need anything except fighting." Wang Lu was even more surprised. "At the very least, we need to reproduce, right? Aren't most of these million people born locally?" The high-tier devilish lord laughed. "You mean population growth? It's very simple. Sometimes, some of us are torn in half by the formless demon, and when we come back to life, we'll become two peoples. Look at that one over there, doesn't he look exactly like me? We were cut in half by the formless demon 300 years ago, and when we wake up, we're already like this." Holy F***ck, you're multiplying by amitosis. Alright, apart from reproduction, what else? Don't you feel tired? After 2,000 years of fighting, don't you feel bored, painful, or tired of fighting? Looking at the tens of thousands of devilish beings on the demarcation line of the battlefield being eroded by the darkness, as if they were raw meat sent into a meat grinder. Wang Lu really didn't think that anyone could persist in such an environment for 2,000 years. Even the most belligerent warriors of Flaming Valley had to vent to their heart's content after the war, or stuff themselves with food or women. It was impossible to fight non-stop, let alone 2,000 years. Although the royal family of the demon realm had conquered the demon realm as warriors, they were no better than those of Flaming Valley. They would feel fear, fatigue, and depression. This endless war was completely unreasonable. Oh, why do you two newcomers have so many questions? Have the tribal people become so wishy-washy? If you want to know why, just go to the battlefield with me and experience it. As he spoke, the high-tier devilish lord took out a pair of sharp pitch-black spears from God knows where. "Here, take it and then rush with me later. As long as you experience the reincarnation of life and death once, you will know why we can persist for 2,000 years. Then he took the lead, directly crossing the large troop of the demon realm and rushing to the front of the battlefield. The strength of this high-tier devilish lord was equivalent to that of a Shudan stage cultivator, and he had a variety of magical abilities. At this time he was like a martial artist in the mortal world, charging forward purely with his physical strength. In the blink of an eye, he crossed the vast battlefield and arrived at the front. He roared loudly, raised his spear and stabbed it into the darkness. Then he saw the black tide roll over him, and not even his bones were left. It was a soul-stirring but foolhardy charge. A moment later, the high-tier devilish lord descended from the sky and looked at Wang Lu and Ouyang Shang with a puzzled expression. "You two didn't follow me?" Of course they couldn't follow him. These demons had the ability to resurrect, but the two invaders absolutely couldn't. If they were swept by the black tide, they would definitely die without a burial place. However, while they were talking, many of the surrounding demons turned their eyes and curiously looked at these two people. "Newcomers? It looks more and more strange. What happened to the people outside now? Did they marry humans? Their strength seems not bad, but their courage is not so good. Don't be afraid, when you really die once, you will know that the so-called fear and pain are all false, and will disappear with the reincarnation of life and death. What you have to do is to keep fighting." More and more demons surrounded the two of them in disgust. Wang Lu and Ouyang Shang exchanged glances, knowing that if they let them continue to watch, they would definitely reveal their flaws. After all, these two demon recruits were exactly the same as humans. The setting was really abnormal. Only this group of demons who had been fighting for 2,000 years, whose brains were full of tumors, could not find any problems for so long. So the two of them made a prompt decision, and without saying a word of nonsense, they each raised their spears and rushed forward. Then, when they were about to come into contact with the darkness, Ouyang Shang took the two of them underground. It should be safe, right? Hiding in the dark underground world, the two of them used their own means to restrain their breath and shield their perception. The strength of the two of them was not particularly high, but they were also confident that they could hide from the group of demon warriors with tumors in their brains outside. This kind of straightforward fighting that had lasted for 2,000 years had already greatly degraded their perception ability. Apart from fighting head-on, these people's other abilities had gradually disappeared, and there was nothing to be afraid of. This dream is very interesting. When the situation stabilized, Wang Lu said, with Fenrir as the imaginary enemy, the continuous bloody battle for 2,000 years. What is the use of it? The Fenrir here should have nothing to do with the real Fenrir. Ouyang Shang speculated, I think it's just a lure. This bloody battle is more like a collection ceremony, but what does the Demon King want to collect through it? Wang Lu said, it should be negative emotions. This demon spirit dream is in a sense the same as the new demon world. The demons of the new demon world were deprived of hatred, and the warriors of the demon spirit dream were deprived of pain, depression, fatigue and so on, becoming more simple creatures. But this part of the emotions cannot completely disappear. They are just collected to make a weapon that can determine the fate of the universe. Black Tide. After all, Ouyang Shang had not been to the demon world and the new demon world, so his reaction was not as fast as Wang Lu's. But after being reminded, he quickly found the right direction. That's most likely the case. In this way it can be linked to the known historical line. The Black Tide in the Savage Land did not come from the weak desert tribe, nor did it come from the demon wolf Fenrir, but from the demon spirit dream. So the next step is to find a way to destroy this dream? But with the scale of this dream. Do you have any way? Wang Lu smiled. What a coincidence there really is. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.